There's a chill in the air, the kind that wraps itself around your neck and refuses to let go. You're alone in the dark, the quiet broken only by the sound of your own breath. But then, there's a whisper, soft at first, barely a sound. A presence. And suddenly, you're no longer sure if it's the wind or something else. That eerie feeling, the unsettling notion that we're never truly alone, is at the heart of ghost stories. It's a feeling that's haunted humanity for as long as we've been able to tell stories. From the simplest whispers of the wind to the terrifying tales of vengeful spirits, ghost stories are born from a universal fear, one that transcends borders, cultures, and generations. They speak to something deeply human, a fear of what happens when we die, of what lingers after we're gone. These stories are old. Very old. Long before books were written and tales were passed from one generation to the next, there was the spoken word. Around fires, and caves, and under the moonlight, people told stories of spirits, beings who once walked among the living but now linger in the shadows. Early humans looked to the stars, the trees, the rivers, and the earth around them, trying to understand what lay beyond life. They didn't have the answers, but they had their stories. Ghosts were born from this need to explain what they couldn't see, to give form to the unknown. In a time when death was a constant, as inevitable as the rising sun, it made sense that something of a person would remain, whether that was their memory, their spirit, or something darker. For those early humans, death was an enigma, a mystery that couldn't be solved. So, they turned to spirits. These weren't just the souls of people who had passed, they were a warning, a reminder of the fragile line between the living and the dead. To the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife was an entire world where souls would journey, weighed by their deeds in life. The Greek and Roman cultures, too, had their underworlds, where spirits were thought to wander or seek vengeance. They told stories of the dead returning, sometimes to haunt, sometimes to guide, but always to remind the living of their own mortality. In many early cultures, spirits were not something to fear outright, but something to respect. They were ancestors, revered guides who could offer wisdom, protection, or a glimpse into the future. But as human societies grew more complex, as religions took hold and beliefs about the afterlife became more defined, the nature of these spirits shifted. They became less benevolent, their return to the world of the living less a blessing and more a curse. Death, it seemed, was no longer just a passage, but something to fear. Ghosts became not just the spirits of those who had passed on, but a representation of the unresolved, the unspoken, the wronged. From the foggy moors of England to the windswept deserts of ancient Mesopotamia, stories of ghosts have haunted every corner of the world. And they all have one thing in common, the sense that the dead can't just be forgotten. That something, some piece of them, lingers. Whether it's the tragic soul of a lover lost too soon, the angry spirit of a betrayed ruler, or the restless ghost of a commoner, these spirits refuse to rest. They return to the places they knew, the people they loved, or the lands they once walked, seeking justice, redemption, or simply the closure they never received. What is it about these spirits, these stories, that captivates us? Why do we return to them over and over again, even though we know they will make our skin crawl and our hearts race? Perhaps it's because they remind us of something we all try to ignore, the reality of our own death. Ghost stories are, in a way to confront that dark truth without having to face it directly. They show us the fear, the heartbreak, and the pain of loss, but they also show us how the living cope with that fear. And in doing so, they offer us a way to make sense of our own lives. We can feel it, can't we? That moment when a ghost story really gets under your skin, when you look over your shoulder, convinced you aren't alone. The sudden cold that creeps into the room, the feeling that someone is watching. The fear that maybe, just maybe, the stories are more than just stories. Maybe there is something out there, lingering, waiting, never truly gone. It's in our nature to search for patterns, to look for explanations, even when none are given. Ghost stories allow us to ask, what if? What if there really is something after death? What if the people we loved are still with us, in some way, just beyond the veil? The idea that the dead can return is both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it means they aren't truly gone, but terrifying because we aren't sure how to deal with them. Take, for example, the ancient belief in the spirits of ancestors. Early humans weren't necessarily afraid of these spirits. They sought their guidance, hoping for protection, blessings, and wisdom. But as the centuries passed, as people's relationships with their ancestors became more distant, these spirits began to take on a darker form. The dead weren't just watching over the living anymore. They were angry, confused, lost. Perhaps they had unfinished business, or perhaps they were simply trapped in the world of the living, unable to find peace. The story of the ghost, then, is as old as humanity itself. It's a reflection of our deepest fears and our most desperate hopes. We want to believe that death isn't the end. We want to think that the people we love, even after they're gone, can still be a part of our lives. Ghost stories play into that desire. They let us glimpse the impossible and feel that shiver of fear, that fleeting moment when the line between life and death seems to blur just a little bit more. It's not just about fear, though. It's about connection. The spirits we hear about in stories, whether they're benevolent or vengeful, lost or seeking peace, are always trying to connect with the living. They have something to say. And it's that longing for connection that keeps ghost stories alive, generation after generation. The dead may be gone, but they're not forgotten. Their voices echo through the ages, reminding us that we are not the only ones who have ever lived, and we are not the only ones who will ever die. The old house stood silent, its walls soaked in shadows and secrets. A single window creaked open in the wind, a mournful sound that sent shivers down your spine. It wasn't the darkness that made you hesitate as you stepped closer, it was the feeling. The oppressive weight of unseen eyes, the whisper of a memory you couldn't quite place. Fear gripped you, a primal response you couldn't shake, as if the house itself remembered every tear, every scream, every last breath ever taken within its walls. Ghost stories are born in moments like these, when the heart races, the mind spins, and the unknown swirls around us like a storm. They are more than tales of the supernatural, they are reflections of something deeply human. Fear, grief, and memory weave together, creating shadows that move and voices that echo long after they've been silenced. These stories don't just terrify, they speak to the rawest parts of us, the ones we rarely confront. Fear, that ancient guardian, is where it begins. It kept our ancestors alive, sharpening their senses when predators lurked nearby. But fear isn't just about survival, it's about control, or the lack of it. The unknown, with its gaping void of answers, triggers something primal. What waits in the dark? What lies beyond death? Ghost stories feed on this uncertainty, playing with our need to make sense of what we can't see. A sudden noise in an empty room, a flicker of movement in the corner of your eye, a voice calling your name when no one is there, your body reacts before your mind can rationalize. Fear transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. A gust of wind becomes a ghost's breath, a shadow becomes a spirit's lingering form. It's not just the physical sensation of fear, the pounding heart or the tightening chest, that gives ghost stories their power. It's the way they make you question everything. Is the creak of the floorboards just the house settling, or is it something more? Ghost stories blur the line between what's real and what's imagined, forcing us to confront the possibility that not everything can be explained. But fear alone doesn't create ghost stories. Grief, with its quiet weight, shapes them too. Grief is love turned inward, a gaping wound that refuses to heal. When someone you love is taken from you, the emptiness they leave behind can feel unbearable. Ghost stories are, in many ways, expressions of this longing, this need to believe that the dead aren't truly gone. A sudden chill when you enter their favorite room, the faint scent of their perfume lingering in the air, the dream where they speak to you as if they've never left. These moments become the foundation of tales we tell ourselves and others. For those left behind, grief can make the impossible seem plausible. The idea of a ghost, a lingering presence of the departed, becomes not just terrifying, but comforting. If they're still here, in some way, then you haven't truly lost them. The dead live on, not just in memories, but in the flickering lights and the cold drafts that remind you of them. A ghost story, then, isn't just about the dead, it's about the living and their desperate attempt to hold on to what's been taken from them. Collective memory, shared across generations, breathes life into these stories. Families pass them down, communities whisper them on dark nights, and they grow with each retelling. The haunted battlefield where soldiers still march, the house where a woman weeps for her lost child, the forest where voices call out in the fog, these stories don't belong to any one person. They belong to everyone who hears them, who carries them forward. They're more than entertainment, they're warnings, traditions, and testaments to what a group of people have endured. Sometimes, these memories are born from trauma. A tragic death, a betrayal, an act of violence, these moments leave marks not just on individuals, but on entire places. Ghost stories give voice to these scars, turning pain into something tangible. A community devastated by war tells stories of restless soldiers wandering the fields at night, searching for peace. A family shattered by loss speaks of a mother's spirit lingering by her child's empty cradle. The pain of the past doesn't fade, it lingers, and ghost stories ensure it is never forgotten. The unknown, that vast and terrifying space beyond human understanding, binds fear, grief, and memory together. It's in the questions that haunt us. What happens when we die? Is there a part of us that lingers? Are ghosts real, or are they just our minds playing tricks on us? Ghost stories don't answer these questions, they amplify them. They make us wonder, second guess, and look over our shoulders in the dark. They remind us that, for all our knowledge, there are still things we don't, and may never, understand. Perhaps this is why ghost stories resonate so deeply. They are mirrors held up to our deepest fears and most fragile hopes. They force us to acknowledge the things we can't control or explain. They remind us of our own mortality and the thin, fragile line between life and death. And yet, they also give us a way to connect with the past, with our emotions, with each other. Because in every ghost story, no matter how terrifying, there is a piece of humanity. A reflection of the pain, love, and questions that define us. So the next time you feel that chill in the air or hear the whisper of a voice you can't quite place, remember that ghost stories are not just about fear. They're about everything we carry with us, the memories that linger, the grief that never fades, and the mysteries we may never solve. The flickering firelight cast long shadows on the walls of the room, where the storyteller's voice carried a haunting rhythm. Children sat wide-eyed, clutching their blankets, while the elders nodded solemnly. The story was not just words, it was a warning, a reminder of consequences, a thread connecting the listeners to something larger than themselves. The ghost in the tale was more than a spirit, it was the embodiment of a lesson, a force that lingered not only to haunt but to teach. Ghost stories have always been more than simple scares. Across cultures, they are woven into the fabric of life, shaping morals, traditions, and even laughter. In every whispered tale, there is purpose, whether to keep a child from wandering too far at night or to hold a community accountable for its sins. Ghosts, though feared, are also guides. Their stories demand that we listen, learn, and remember. In Japan, the soft rustling of a silk kimono can send shivers down your spine. A woman's figure appears in the mist, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She is not just a ghost, she is a yurei, a spirit bound by unfinished business. Perhaps she was betrayed by her lover, or she died unjustly. Her presence is terrifying, but her story holds a mirror to human actions. In tales like these, betrayal leads to vengeance, and dishonor brings curses. The yurei does not merely haunt the living, it punishes those who act without integrity. The lesson is clear: honor your promises, respect the bonds of love, or face the consequences that linger beyond death. In Mexico, the mournful cry of La Llorona echoes along riverbanks. Ms. Hios, she wails, searching for her lost children. Mothers warn their children not to wander too close to the water, not because the rivers are unsafe, but because she might be waiting. Her story is steeped in tragedy, a mother who drowned her own children in a moment of despair and now roams the earth in endless regret. It is both a cautionary tale and a moral compass, reminding people of the weight of their choices. In her grief, there is a universal message: the things we do cannot always be undone, and guilt is a ghost that will haunt you forever. In the rolling hills of Ireland, the banshee's keening cry foretells death. Her voice is piercing, chilling, yet it is not cruel. It is a warning, a reminder that life is fragile. Families who hear her wail may be overcome with dread, but they also find solace in the knowledge that death is part of life, an inevitability that connects all. The banshee's presence isn't just about fear, it's about preparation, about honoring the life that's slipping away. Her story teaches resilience in the face of loss and reverence for the mysteries of death. In many African cultures, ghost stories are layered with wisdom. Ancestors are not merely ghosts, they are protectors, watching over the living with care. Yet there are also spirits who bring justice, spirits who remind people to respect tradition and follow the community's moral code. If someone acts selfishly, harms another, or disrespects the sacred, the spirits will make themselves known. A strange illness, an unsettling dream, or an eerie silence might signal their displeasure. These stories remind people to live harmoniously, to honor the past, and to act with kindness toward others. In China, the Hungry Ghost Festival transforms fear into reflection. During this time, the dead are believed to walk among the living, seeking offerings to ease their suffering. The idea of hungry ghosts, spirits tormented by their insatiable desires, is a powerful reminder of life's moral choices. Greed, selfishness, and cruelty are not forgotten in death, they follow the soul, consuming it from within. Families light incense and burn paper offerings not only to appease these ghosts, but also to reflect on their own lives. The ghosts are a warning: live with compassion, or your spirit will carry the weight of your wrongs. But ghost stories aren't always about warnings. Sometimes, they're about laughter, an uneasy, nervous laughter that brings communities together. In the Philippines, tales of the copper, a mischievous, cigar-smoking tree spirit, are both spooky and playful. People tell these stories around campfires, sharing chills and giggles in equal measure. The copper might play tricks on the unsuspecting, hiding their belongings or leading them astray, but he is rarely malicious. His story binds people together, creating moments of shared fear that quickly turn to humor. The copper is a reminder that life's fears can be faced with a smile and that even the unknown can be a source of joy. In America, ghost stories often carry a sense of justice. The haunted plantation house, the restless Civil War soldier, the weeping woman in white, all these spirits linger for a reason. They seek to right a wrong, to remind the living of the pain they caused. These tales are not just entertainment, they are reckonings. They hold a mirror to history, forcing people to confront the darker parts of their past. A haunted house isn't just a spooky attraction, it's a reminder that the past is never truly gone, that the wounds of injustice leave marks that time cannot erase. In India, the ghost stories of the Chudale, a vengeful female spirit, speak to societal fears and wrongs. The Chudale is often a woman who suffered greatly in life, perhaps betrayed by her family or wronged by her lover. In death, she becomes powerful, terrifying those who fail to protect or respect her. Her story is a warning against cruelty, especially toward women, but it is also a declaration of her strength. Though she is feared, she is also respected, a symbol of the consequences of oppression and the resilience of the human spirit. Ghost stories are more than whispers in the dark, they are the threads that tie communities together. They entertain, yes, but they also educate. They remind people of what matters: love, respect, integrity, and the choices that define us. Whether they bring chills or laughter, whether they warn or comfort, these stories endure because they speak to the heart of what it means to be human. The ghost may be gone, but its voice carries on, teaching, haunting, and holding us close. The air was thick with incense as the priest raised his hands, calling out to the gods. The flickering flames of the candles danced and flickered as the walls around him seemed to close in, pressing upon him with the weight of ages. He was not alone. In the shadows, beyond the flickering light, something stirred. There was a presence, unseen but felt, the lingering essence of someone who had crossed over into the afterlife but hadn't truly left. The priest could sense it, a wandering spirit, perhaps one who was not yet at peace. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end. It was simply the beginning of another journey. But not all who died found peace in the afterlife. Some souls wandered, unable to cross over, trapped between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Ghosts, spirits of those who had not found rest, were very real in the Egyptian world, and they were a force that could not be ignored. Their presence, their lingering voices, and their restless movements became part of the ancient landscape, shaping the beliefs of a civilization that was obsessed with the mystery of the afterlife. In Egypt, the afterlife wasn't a simple destination, it was a world as complex and layered as the land of the living. The dead were not gone forever. They lived on, but in a different way. A part of them, their Ka, the essence of their soul, would continue to exist, and this Ka needed nourishment. Offerings of food, drink, and prayers were placed at tombs, ensuring that the dead could continue their existence. This belief in the continued existence of the soul gave rise to a complex view of spirits. While some souls peacefully traveled to the underworld, others found themselves lost, trapped in limbo, unable to pass on due to unresolved wrongs or unfinished business. The stories of wandering souls were told in hushed tones around fires, passed down through generations as warnings and reflections of human nature. The Ba, another aspect of the soul, was said to roam the earth if it wasn't properly cared for in the afterlife. The restless Ba was not just a memory of the deceased, it was the soul itself, unable to find peace. These souls were often seen as vengeful spirits, bitter for having been forgotten or wronged in life. Their cries were heard in the quiet moments of the night, their presence felt when the wind shifted, carrying with it a whisper that sounded like a name long lost. In some of these stories, the gods themselves were tied to the spirits of the dead. The mighty Osiris, god of the afterlife, ruled over the underworld, overseeing the dead and guiding their souls to the final judgment. Yet even Osiris, in his divine wisdom, could not erase the pain of those souls who had been wronged or who had not lived a life worthy of the afterlife's blessings. Their suffering echoed through the halls of the dead, and sometimes it was Osiris who had to intervene, offering them the chance for redemption or guiding them through the labyrinth of the underworld, where they might find peace or eternal torment. But not all spirits were bound to Osiris' rule. Some of the gods themselves were seen as figures who could be invoked to bring peace to the restless dead. Hathor, goddess of love and joy, could help to soothe a wandering soul, while Anubis, the god of mummification and the protector of graves, would help ensure that a soul's journey to the afterlife was safe and guided. But these gods were also protectors from the darker, more sinister forces that could trap the soul in the realm of the living. One of the most unsettling stories from ancient Egyptian mythology is that of the Ba who could not find rest. This restless soul, sometimes portrayed as a bird or a shadow, would wander the earth, unable to escape its torment. The Ba might hover near the tomb, its cries unheard by the living but felt deeply by the mourners who came to visit the graves of their loved ones. It was said that such souls could bring misfortune, sickness, or death to the living, a punishment for the neglect of the proper rites or an indication of the failure to honor the dead. The tombs themselves became more than simple resting places, they were the gateways between worlds, charged with both reverence and fear. These wandering souls were not always malevolent, however. Some were simply confused, lost between two realms, unable to understand why they had not been allowed to move on. The concept of Heka, magic, or divine power, was integral to the Egyptians' understanding of life and death, and it was believed that those who could wield the right kind of magic could guide these souls to rest. The priest or family member who could properly perform the rituals of the dead could offer peace to the wandering Ba, ensuring that the soul's journey was completed without harm. But without the correct rites, there was no telling what might happen. The spirits of the dead could take on many forms, sometimes even appearing in the guise of animals, other times as shadows lurking just beyond the living's sight. And then there were the stories of the damned, those who, for whatever reason, were denied the passage to the afterlife. These souls, cursed by the gods or punished for their transgressions in life, would forever wander in the darkness of the underworld, never allowed to join the eternal fields of peace. They were often depicted as figures of horror, their forms twisted by their misdeeds. The gods, even in their infinite power, could not rescue these souls from their fate. Their stories served as a warning to the living: live rightly, or your soul will be left to wander forever, cursed to remember the mistakes of your life. In these stories, the dead were never truly gone. Their presence lingered in the air, in the walls of tombs, and in the hearts of those left behind. The restless souls were not just phantoms, they were warnings, voices of the past calling out for justice, remembrance, or peace. And in their cries, there was a deep truth: the belief that the dead, like the living, were not to be forgotten. Their memory lived on, not just in the tombs or the rituals, but in the stories told by the firelight, and the hushed whispers of those who feared what might happen if the proper respects weren't paid. The ancient Egyptians understood the powerful connection between the living and the dead, the tenuous thread that bound the two worlds together. Ghosts were not mere stories told to frighten children, they were a living, breathing part of their world, a reminder that death was not an end, but a continuation of a journey that could take many forms, some peaceful, some tragic, and some terrifying. The wind howled through the cracks of ancient stone, carrying with it the faintest whisper of a name long forgotten. It was a name once spoken by someone who had crossed the threshold between life and death, leaving behind only shadows, unanswered questions, and the sense that something lingered just beyond the veil. The souls of the dead were never truly gone, not in Mesopotamia, not in Sumer. Here, the journey of death was a passage through darkness, a road paved with dangers, and ruled by forces beyond human understanding. In these lands, the dead were never alone. The moment they drew their last breath, their soul was taken to the underworld, a place as mysterious as it was terrifying. This underworld, known to the Sumerians as Kur, was a realm of shadow and stillness, a place of eternal night where the dead had to face their fate. The journey was never easy. The dead had to cross a river, pass through gates guarded by demons, and navigate a labyrinth of dangers, all before they could find rest, if they were lucky. The gods themselves did not walk this path. They watched from above, guiding the souls of the dead with a distant hand, while the dead had to fend for themselves. And it was not just the souls of the peaceful who entered this world of darkness. Every soul, regardless of its deeds, would eventually make the trek to the afterlife. The Mesopotamians believed that once someone passed away, they became a part of the underworld, whether they were a king, a farmer, a slave, or a merchant. In death, all were equal, and yet, not all souls were destined to find peace. One of the most terrifying parts of the journey was the realm of Ereshkigal, the goddess who ruled the underworld. Ereshkigal was a fierce and unyielding ruler. Her heart was said to be cold as the stone walls of her palace, and she would not welcome souls with kindness. Those who entered her domain had to face her wrath, and many believed that if they were not properly prepared, they would be trapped forever in the shadowy darkness of her kingdom. There was no return once you entered her gates. The gates of the underworld were sealed behind you, and only the gods had the power to open them again. But not all spirits who entered the underworld were without hope. Some found their way into the hands of the Anunnaki, the great gods of Mesopotamian mythology, who ruled over the dead and offered guidance. The Anunnaki held the power to judge the souls, determining whether they would find peace or be cursed to wander for eternity. These gods were not simply figures of worship, but active participants in the lives and deaths of mortals. They were the ones who determined the fate of the dead, and their judgment was as final as the earth itself. However, even the Anunnaki could not always protect the living from the darker forces that roamed the land. Demons and spirits, once human, but transformed by their own suffering or wrongs, wandered the earth and the underworld alike. Some were known to torment the living, while others were bound to the afterlife, seeking revenge for the wrongs they had suffered in life. These wandering souls, hungry for vengeance or trapped by their own sorrow, were a constant threat to the living, reminding them that the line between life and death was never clear, never secure. One of the most chilling figures in Mesopotamian mythology was Lilith, a demon who was said to be a child stealer, lurking in the shadows of the night. Her presence was a constant reminder that death's reach was not bound by time. Lilith was said to be a spirit of the night, appearing at twilight when the world between the living and the dead was at its thinnest. She was a symbol of death's insidious nature, creeping up in moments of weakness, taking what it wanted without mercy or warning. Another demon, Galu, was the embodiment of death's relentless pursuit. Galu was a fearsome creature whose very touch could drag a soul into the underworld. The Mesopotamians believed that the Galu would follow the dead after their passing, ensuring that they reached the underworld whether they were ready or not. There was no escaping the pull of Galu, no running from the inevitability of death. It was said that the Galu was so powerful that even the gods feared it. But it wasn't just the demons who haunted the underworld, it was the spirits of the dead themselves, those souls who, for reasons unknown, could not or would not leave. These spirits were often described as being restless, trapped in a world of perpetual darkness. They wandered the desolate lands, calling out to the living, begging for remembrance, for offerings, for someone to care. These souls had not found peace because the living had forgotten them, or worse, had failed to honor them properly. The dead were not only remembered by their families, they were sustained by them. Without this care, these spirits would be lost to eternity, forever seeking something they could never have. In some stories, the souls of the dead were not to be feared but to be respected. The Sumerians believed that the spirits of ancestors could still offer wisdom and guidance. It was said that the ancestors could communicate with the living, offering blessings or warnings from beyond the grave. If a family failed to honor its dead, it was believed that the ancestors would grow angry, their spirits turning vengeful. In these moments, the dead were not just memories, they were present, and they demanded to be heard. The journey to the underworld was long and treacherous, but it did not end there. The spirits of the dead were tied to the land they had left behind, their souls forever linked to the places and people they had known in life. Even in death, they could reach out, their whispers carried by the winds, their shadows dancing on the edges of the living world. In Mesopotamian and Sumerian myths, the ghosts of the dead were more than just phantoms, they were the keepers of history, the guardians of memory, and the eternal witnesses to the fragility of life. The living and the dead were not separate. They were intertwined, each shaping the other, each leaving an imprint that would never be erased. The fog rolled in from the darkened waters, creeping silently across the shores of the ancient world, just as it had done for centuries. Beneath the pale light of the moon, there was something unsettling in the air, a chill that carried whispers of the dead. It was said that the spirits of the underworld could cross the river Styx, guided by the boatman Charon, to wander among the living or make their presence known in the world above. For the ancient Greeks and Romans, the dead never truly left. They were always close, lingering in the shadows, their whispers carried by the winds, their faces sometimes appearing in dreams or in the flickers of candlelight. In Greece and Rome, death was not an end but a transformation, a crossing into a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred and trembled. For the Greeks, the afterlife was a place where the soul could rest or suffer depending on the life it had led. The soul would travel to the underworld, ruled by Hades, the god of the dead. The journey to this dark realm was one few came back from, for once the soul crossed the river Styx, it was nearly impossible to return. Yet the Greeks believed that ghosts, shadows of those who had not found peace, were never far away. They were not merely spirits, they were the souls of loved ones, friends, or strangers, forever caught in the limbo of the afterlife. When heroes or ordinary men ventured into the underworld, they were often confronted by the restless spirits of the dead. The most famous of these journeys was perhaps that of Odysseus, whose journey in the Odyssey took him to the very heart of the underworld. It was there that Odysseus encountered the shades of the dead, their forms pale and transparent, their voices thin and distant. Some were noble, some were bitter, and others were tragic, their fate sealed by the choices they had made in life. These ghosts, trapped in their endless existence, were not just stories, they were warnings, reminders of what awaited anyone who failed to honor the gods or lived a life of injustice. One of the most haunting moments of the Odyssey was when Odysseus came face to face with the spirit of the prophet Tiresias. Tiresias, a man who had once lived and served the gods, now wandered the dark halls of the underworld as a ghost, offering wisdom to the living. He was not the only one Odysseus encountered. The dead came to him in waves, some seeking answers, others bitterly recalling the mistakes they had made. The world of the dead was filled with these spirits, each one carrying the weight of their own choices and regrets. It was as if the underworld itself was a place of both judgment and reflection, where the dead were forced to relive the lives they had led. In Rome, the beliefs surrounding ghosts were much the same. The dead were never fully gone. Their spirits lingered, watching over the living, influencing events, and sometimes even exacting revenge on those who had wronged them. The Romans believed that the spirits of the dead, known as manes, would continue to affect the world of the living if not properly honored. They had to be appeased with rituals, sacrifices, and prayers, or else they would grow restless. Some spirits, though, were not as easy to appease. These vengeful ghosts, known as lemurs, were said to haunt the living, exacting terrible retribution for any injustice or slight. In the Aeneid, written by the poet Virgil, the hero Aeneas ventures into the underworld, much like Odysseus, to seek guidance from the spirits of the dead. His journey is filled with visions of the past, present, and future, and as he travels deeper into the dark realm, he encounters a host of souls, each one bound by the choices they made in life. Some souls, like the tragic Dido, are consumed by sorrow and despair, while others, like those of the future Roman heroes, are filled with hope and purpose. Aeneas's journey through the underworld is not just a physical journey, it is an emotional and spiritual test, a chance to confront the past and understand the weight of fate. The spirits that Aeneas encounters are not simply echoes of the past, they are warnings, guides, and reminders of the path he must follow. They are the manifestations of the choices that have shaped history, and their presence serves as a constant reminder that the living are always connected to the dead. The spirits are tied to the land, to the gods, and to the legacy of their actions. They are not simply remembered, they live on, influencing the world of the living in subtle and powerful ways. The presence of ghosts in Greek and Roman mythology was not confined to epic tales of heroes and gods. Everyday people believed that the dead could make their presence known, and that the living had a responsibility to remember them, to honor them, and to keep their spirits at peace. It was said that spirits could be seen in dreams, in the rustling of the leaves, or in the stillness of a quiet night. They could appear as shadows in the corners of a room or as figures that flickered in the periphery of one's vision. The Greeks and Romans believed that these spirits, though invisible, were ever present, interacting with the world of the living in ways both subtle and profound. The ancient world was filled with ghosts, spirits of the dead who continued to wander the earth, searching for peace, seeking vengeance, or trying to complete unfinished business. Whether they were the tragic souls of Odyssey or Aeneid, or the restless manes and vengeful lemurs of Roman myth, these spirits were not bound by time. They were eternal, lingering in the hearts of the living, reminding them that death was not an end, but a continuation of the story. The living and the dead were never truly separated. In the ancient Greek and Roman world, the dead were as real as the living, their stories a part of the ongoing narrative of life and death. And so, the whispers of the dead continued to float on the winds of the ancient world. The echoes of their lives, their struggles, and their choices reverberated through time, reaching the ears of those who dared to listen. These ghosts, these spirits, were not mere phantoms of the past, they were the bearers of wisdom, the keepers of history, and the eternal witnesses to the fragility of human existence. In the end, it was their stories that shaped the world of the living, just as much as the world of the dead. The wind howled through the jagged mountains, carrying with it the cold bite of winter. It was a sound that spoke of ancient battles, of warriors who had once fought bravely under the vast northern sky. In the land of the Vikings, death was not an end, it was another part of the saga, another chapter in the endless story of life and bloodshed. The dead did not simply vanish into nothingness. They had their own place in the world, a place where spirits wandered, where battles never ceased, and where the afterlife was just as harsh and unforgiving as the life they had left behind. To the Norse, the world of the dead was a land divided, a land of shadow and cold, ruled by the goddess Hel, daughter of the trickster god Loki. Hel's domain was a place of eternal twilight, where the souls of those who had died of sickness or old age were taken to rest. The Vikings believed that those who died in battle, however, were chosen by the Valkyries, warrior maidens who rode through the sky on winged horses, selecting the bravest of the fallen to be taken to Valhalla, Odin's great hall. There, the chosen warriors would live forever, feasting and fighting until the end of time, when they would rise again to fight in the final battle of Ragnarok. But for those who did not die in battle, the journey was less glorious. They would be guided to the land of hell, a dark and cold place where spirits wandered aimlessly, their hearts heavy with unfulfilled dreams and regrets. Hell's realm was not a place of peace. It was a land where the dead were lost, trapped in the shadows, forever longing for something they could never have. It was a world of forgotten souls, of warriors who had fought bravely but never had the chance to achieve the glory they deserved. The spirits of the dead did not simply fade away into obscurity. They became wights, restless spirits that roamed the land, unable to find peace. These wights were not the kind of ghosts that whispered sweetly or waited patiently. No, these were the angry souls of those who had been denied the honor of Valhalla, the ones who had died without the warrior's death. They were not content to rest. They wandered the earth, seeking vengeance, craving the blood of the living to ease their pain. Some of these wights became the Draugr, the undead. These were the bodies of the dead, reanimated by dark magic, driven by hunger and the thirst for revenge. They were terrifying figures, towering over the living with pale, rotting flesh and eyes that gleamed with malice. A Draugr could not be easily slain. They were more than just ghosts, they were nightmares made real. They lived in the graves of the dead, guarding their treasures and their secrets, attacking anyone who dared to disturb their resting place. The Draugr were the stuff of legends, terrifying creatures that lurked in the darkness, waiting for an unsuspecting soul to stumble into their grasp. The legends told of men and women who ventured too close to the tombs, only to be dragged into the earth by the claws of the undead. The Vikings feared the Draugr because they knew that even death could not always provide an escape. The dead could return, and they could be more dangerous than ever before. The Valkyries, in contrast, were the shining lights of the afterlife. They were the warriors who selected the bravest souls from the battlefield, guiding them to Valhalla, where they would fight beside Odin and the gods in the final battle of Ragnarok. The Valkyries were more than just deathbringers, they were symbols of honor, of courage, and of the Viking ideals. Their presence was a reminder that, in the eyes of the Norse, the greatest death was one that came in battle, a death that brought glory, that ensured a place in the hall of the gods. But even the Valkyries had their darker side. They were not just warriors, they were the arbiters of fate. They chose who lived and who died, who would ascend to Valhalla and who would be sent to hell. The lives of the Norse warriors were in their hands. To be chosen by the Valkyries was to be honored, to be given a chance to fight and feast in the halls of the gods for all eternity. To be passed over was a fate worse than death. For the Norse, death was never an escape. It was a continuation of the struggle. Those who died in battle were celebrated, their spirits sent to Valhalla, where they would feast until the final battle. But those who died in other ways, whether through sickness, age, or accident, were left to wander the cold, bleak world of hell. Their spirits were not as honored, and they were not as content. They were the wights, the Draugr, the forgotten souls who wandered the earth, lost and angry, unable to find peace. They were the shadows of the dead, reminders that not all deaths were equal, and that some souls were doomed to wander forever. In the silent hours of the night, when the wind howled and the fire burned low, the Vikings would whisper of the spirits that roamed the land. They spoke of the Draugr, of the Valkyries, and of the cold, dark halls of hell. They spoke of the ghosts that wandered between the living and the dead, their restless spirits carrying with them the weight of their lives and their deaths. And they knew, in the depths of their hearts, that death was not the end, it was simply another beginning, a continuation of the eternal struggle between life and death, honor and shame, light and shadow. The Norse believed that death was not to be feared but to be faced with strength and courage. The dead would always be with them, in the wind, in the shadows, in the stories that were passed down through the ages. The spirits of the dead would never truly leave. They would linger, in the halls of Valhalla, in the cold realm of hell, and in the hearts of those who still remembered their names. The moon hung low, casting an eerie silver glow over the ancient village. The air was thick with incense, its scent weaving between the flickering lanterns and paper offerings scattered along the streets. Shadows danced on the walls, whispers carried on the wind. It was the 7th month of the lunar calendar, a time when the boundary between the living and the dead grew thin, and spirits stepped into the world once more. Families gathered to honor their ancestors, their voices trembling with reverence, but behind their prayers lay a quiet fear. Not all spirits were benevolent, and not all of them had found peace. In Chinese mythology, death was not the end, but a continuation of life's obligations. The spirits of the deceased, especially ancestors, were woven deeply into the fabric of family and culture. Ancestor worship was not just a practice, it was a duty. The living were expected to care for the spirits of their forebears, ensuring they were remembered, respected, and provided for in the afterlife. Offerings of food, wine, and paper effigies of earthly possessions were burned in their honor, the smoke carrying these gifts into the otherworld. The living and the dead were connected, bound by love, respect, and an unbroken thread of shared existence. But not all spirits received such care. Some were forgotten, neglected, or wronged in life. These were the hungry ghosts, restless and tormented beings driven by insatiable longing. Their thin, emaciated forms were said to wander the earth, searching for offerings, their mouths too small to eat, their throats too narrow to drink. They carried the pain of lives cut short, of injustices left unresolved, their hunger a manifestation of yearning for peace they could never find. The 7th lunar month was their time, the ghost month. On its 15th day, the ghost festival illuminated the night with fire and fear. It was said that on this day, the gates of the underworld were thrown open, and spirits poured into the mortal world. Some came to reunite with their families, seeking solace and remembrance, while others came out of bitterness, seeking vengeance or restitution for the wrongs they had suffered. The living, aware of the thin line they walked, filled the streets with offerings, their hands trembling as they laid out food and burned joss paper. The scent of offerings mingled with the heavy air, an unspoken plea for peace between the worlds. Families whispered tales of those who had dared to ignore the festival's rituals. The stories warned of unlit lanterns and forgotten offerings, of spirits angered by neglect. It was said they could bring illness, misfortune, or worse. Children huddled close to their elders, their eyes wide as they listened to stories of vengeful ghosts who roamed the streets, their cries echoing in the silence of the night. The living knew better than to tempt fate. The spirits were to be appeased, respected, and above all, feared. Yet the Ghost Festival was not only about fear. It was a time of reunion, a fleeting chance for the living to connect with those they had lost. Families gathered around tables laden with food, their voices soft as they spoke to the empty seats left for the departed. The air was heavy with longing, the ache of absence softened by the hope that their offerings might reach the ones they loved. The sight of a gently swaying lantern or the faint scent of familiar incense was enough to bring tears to their eyes, a sign that perhaps the spirits were near, listening, watching, remembering. The hungry ghosts, however, lingered at the edges of these moments. Their hollow eyes gleamed in the darkness, their bony hands grasping at the scraps left behind. Their stories were whispered in hushed tones, of spirits born from lives of greed, cruelty, or neglect. These ghosts were not like ancestors. They were not loved, and they did not love in return. Their presence was a reminder of what could happen to those who strayed too far from the path of righteousness, who failed to honor the bonds of family and humanity. But even these spirits were not entirely beyond hope. Rituals were performed to ease their suffering, to guide them toward a better existence. Monks chanted sutras, their voices rising and falling like waves, a beacon to the lost. Offerings were made specifically for them, simple meals of rice and water, placed at crossroads and riverbanks where the hungry ghosts were thought to gather. These acts were not only for the spirits, but for the living, a way to balance the scales, to ensure that no soul was left entirely alone in the dark. The Ghost Festival held a mirror to the human heart, reflecting its deepest fears and its greatest loves. The living honored the dead not just out of obligation, but out of a profound understanding of their own mortality. The rituals, the offerings, the prayers, they were not just for the spirits, but for themselves, a way to hold on to the ones they had lost, to keep their memory alive in a world that moved relentlessly forward. As the festival drew to a close, the lanterns were released, floating down rivers like tiny stars. Each carried a wish, a prayer, a message to the spirits. The waters shimmered with their light, a fleeting bridge between the two worlds. The living watched in silence, their hearts heavy with the weight of what could not be said, what could not be undone. And as the last lantern disappeared into the distance, they turned away, knowing that the spirits would return to the underworld, and the gates would close once more. But the memories would linger. The scent of incense, the flicker of flames, the whispered stories, they were threads that tied the living to the dead, a reminder that no one was ever truly gone. The spirits might fade, their presence might grow faint, but they would always remain, in the shadows, in the silence, in the hearts of those who remembered. The air was unnaturally cold, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and refuses to leave. A faint sound echoed, a wet, dragging shuffle, and then a low, sorrowful wail. It was the kind of sound that stopped time, freezing the breath in your throat. The lantern flickered, its weak light casting long, trembling shadows. Somewhere in the darkness, unseen but unmistakable, a presence lingered. A presence filled with anger, sorrow, and something even darker, something that felt like a cry for justice that could never be silenced. In Japan, these haunting spirits are known as yurei, the restless dead. Bound by powerful emotions, they are said to be souls unable to move on, tethered to the world of the living by unfinished business, unfulfilled promises, or unspeakable pain. Unlike the friendly ghosts imagined in some cultures, yurei carry a terrifying weight. Their pale, translucent forms are a vision of death itself, long, unkempt hair hanging over their faces, white burial robes clinging to their fragile frames. Their hollow eyes seem to pierce right through you, seeing not just your fear, but every secret you thought you'd buried. Among the most feared of the yurei are the onryo, vengeful spirits whose wrath knows no bounds. These are not ghosts that merely haunt, they destroy. Wronged in life, they return to punish those who caused their suffering, and often anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. It is said that an onryo's rage is so intense it can bend reality, twisting the world into a reflection of their torment. They are unrelenting, their pain transforming into a curse that spreads like a shadow over everything it touches. One such story whispers through the quiet alleys of memory, a tale that still makes hearts race and hands tremble. Oiwa, a beautiful young woman betrayed by her husband, was poisoned and left to die in agony. Her face, disfigured by the poison, became a mask of her suffering. When she returned as a yurei, she sought vengeance not only against her husband, but against anyone who tried to erase or forget her pain. Her story is etched into Japan's cultural memory, a chilling reminder that betrayal and cruelty can leave wounds far deeper than death. But the terror of yurei is not confined to ancient myths. Their presence has spilled into modern tales that continue to grip audiences around the world. Stories like The Grudge and Ringu are steeped in the essence of yurei, their imagery haunting and unforgettable. Who can forget the twisted form of Kayako, her broken body crawling unnaturally down the stairs, her guttural death rattle reverberating through the silence? Or Sadako, emerging from a television screen, her hair dripping with water from an otherworldly well, her movements jerky and inhuman? These stories remind us that the past is never truly gone and that some grievances refuse to fade into obscurity. The power of these tales lies in their ability to tap into primal fears. The idea that someone could be so consumed by pain and rage that even death cannot release them, it's a thought that lingers, clinging to the corners of your mind long after the lights have been turned off. The yurei don't just haunt places, they haunt memories. They remind us of every unspoken word, every unresolved hurt, every guilt we try to bury. They are mirrors, reflecting the darker parts of ourselves and the consequences of our actions. There is a strange beauty in the sorrow of the yurei, a fragile humanity that makes their horror all the more poignant. They were once like us, living, breathing, feeling. Their suffering is not alien, it is painfully familiar. It is the betrayal of a lover, the loss of a child, the injustice of a life cut short. Their stories are not just tales of terror, they are cries for understanding, for acknowledgement, for a kind of justice that the living world could not give. Yet, even as they terrify, the yurei also evoke a deep empathy. Who among us hasn't felt the weight of unresolved pain? Who hasn't wished for the chance to make things right, to hold on to something that has slipped away? The Uriai, for all their rage and sorrow, are reminders of the fragility of life and the enduring power of love and loss. As the wind howls through the empty streets, carrying with it the faint echo of a mournful cry, you might feel it, the faintest brush of cold air against your neck, the sensation of being watched. It's nothing, you tell yourself, just the night playing tricks. But as the lanterns flicker and the shadows stretch, you can't shake the feeling that somewhere, in the quiet darkness, a story is being told. A story of pain, of vengeance, of love too powerful to let go. And perhaps, just perhaps, a Uriai is waiting, unseen but not forgotten, carrying a message that will linger long after the night is gone. The night was heavy, the kind of oppressive silence that feels alive. A lone oil lamp flickered in the corner of the small room, casting elongated shadows on the mud walls. Somewhere outside, the mournful cry of a jackal echoed, sending a shiver down the spine of the young boy huddled on his mat. His grandmother's voice trembled as she whispered the story of the Pretas, hungry ghosts condemned to wander the earth, their skeletal forms writhing in eternal torment. The boy's wide eyes stared into the dark, imagining the hollow, unquenchable hunger of those cursed spirits. In Indian mythology, ghosts are not mere apparitions, they are the consequences of a life lived with mistakes, misdeeds, or incomplete rituals. The Pretas, those pitiable beings, are said to be cursed by their karma. They are born out of greed, anger, or selfishness in life, condemned to an existence of relentless yearning. With their distended bellies and tiny mouths, they symbolize insatiable desire, always craving, never satisfied. It is said that they wander the world, their whispers carried on the wind, their presence marked by a cold, unsettling stillness. But it's not just the Pretas that haunt the living. Neric, the underworld, is a place of unimaginable horrors where souls are sent to atone for their sins. The stories describe it as a place of fire and ice, where each torment is carefully tailored to the deeds of the deceased. Those who harm others in life might find themselves endlessly pursued by beasts with gnashing teeth, while liars are forced to carry the weight of their untruths in the form of crushing burdens. These tales are more than moral warnings, they are vivid, visceral reminders of the thin veil between this world and the next. There's an ancient tale of a man named Pundarika, a wealthy merchant consumed by greed. He exploited the poor, hoarding his wealth while others starved. When death came for him, it was not gentle. His soul found itself in Neric, bound by chains of gold that burned hotter than fire. His screams, they say, could be heard by the living during the ghostly hours of the night. And when he was finally released to the realm of Pretas, his punishment continued. He was cursed to roam the earth, unable to touch or taste the wealth he once valued above all else. In the heart of these stories lies a thread of hope and redemption. Rituals and prayers offered by the living can ease the suffering of the dead. The Shraddha ceremony, performed with reverence and devotion, is believed to provide food and comfort to wandering spirits, helping them find peace. Families light lamps, offer rice balls, and recite sacred chants, their voices trembling with a mixture of fear and love. It is a moment of connection between the worlds, a bridge built from grief and memory. But not all spirits are bound by sorrow. Some return with anger, seeking vengeance for injustices committed against them. These spirits, known as churls, are said to be the souls of women wronged in life. The stories describe them as beautiful but terrifying, with twisted feet that betray their otherworldly nature. They lure their tormentors into the dark, exacting justice with a cold, merciless hand. The tale of Mohini, a churel who haunted the forests of Rajasthan, still sends shivers down the spines of those who hear it. She was betrayed by the man she loved, left to die alone. In death, she became a shadow that moved with the wind, her haunting cries a chilling echo of her pain. These stories are not confined to Hindu beliefs. Buddhism, with its focus on the cycle of rebirth, offers its own haunting visions of the afterlife. The Pitas, akin to the Pretas, are restless souls trapped in the liminal space between worlds. Their suffering is a poignant reminder of the consequences of attachment and desire. Monks chant prayers for these souls, their voices resonating through the night, a beacon of hope for those lost in darkness. In Jainism, the concept of karma is equally profound, shaping the fate of the soul with meticulous precision. Ghosts in Jain tales are not mere wanderers, they are bound by their actions, their presence a stark reminder of the ethical choices that define existence. It is said that a pure soul can transcend even the most harrowing of fates, rising above the shadows of the past. The Ghost Festival, celebrated in parts of India, is a night when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. Fires burn brightly to guide lost souls, and offerings of food and water are made with trembling hands. The air is thick with incense, the scent mingling with the soft murmur of prayers. It is a night of both fear and love, a time to honor those who came before and to seek their blessings. As the boy listened to his grandmother's trembling voice, the flickering light of the lamp seemed to shift. For a moment, just a fleeting second, he thought he saw a shadow move where there should have been none. His breath caught in his throat, his heart pounding in his chest. Was it his imagination, or was there someone, watching? The thought lingered, heavy and unspoken, as the story continued, weaving a tapestry of fear, longing, and hope. These tales are more than stories. They are threads that connect the living to the dead, the present to the past. They are reminders of our humanity, our frailty, and the choices that shape our existence. As the night deepened, the boy could not shake the feeling that the shadows held more than just darkness, that somewhere, a restless spirit might be listening too. The night air was still, heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. Somewhere in the distance, the cry of a bird pierced the quiet, a sound that seemed to linger far too long. In the faint glow of the moon, a woman in white stood by the well, her long hair spilling down her back like an ink-stained waterfall. Her head tilted slightly, as if listening for something or someone. A soft rustle followed, but there was no wind. Only the sense that the shadows had grown sharper, the darkness deeper, and the weight of unseen eyes pressing down. This was no ordinary woman. She was a Gwizin, a spirit bound to the world by unresolved pain, tethered to the places she once called home. The people in the nearby village knew her story too well. Betrayed in life, forgotten in death, she haunted the well where her despair had reached its peak. Some claimed to see her silhouette swaying in the mist, others swore they heard her mournful sigh carried on the breeze. Yet no one dared speak her name aloud, for to do so might call her closer. In Korean mythology, ghosts are not just spectral presences, they are echoes of lives interrupted, shadows cast by grief, anger, and unfulfilled promises. The Gwizin embody this idea. Often depicted as pale, forlorn figures draped in flowing white hanbok, they wander the world with their feet just above the ground, unable to move on until their pain is acknowledged. Their stories are etched into the fabric of Korean culture, whispered in hushed tones around flickering candles, passed from generation to generation like warnings in the dark. The roots of these tales intertwine with the deep respect for ancestors that defines Korean tradition. The living hold a sacred duty to honor the dead, to keep their memories alive through ritual and reverence. Ancestor worship is not just an act of devotion, it is a lifeline, a connection between worlds. Families gather on special days, lighting incense and preparing offerings of rice, fruit, and wine. They bow deeply before the portraits of their forebears, their prayers filled with gratitude and longing. It is believed that these acts nourish the spirits, ensuring their peace and protection. Yet, the consequences of neglecting this bond are dire. A forgotten ancestor can transform into a restless spirit, their discontent rippling through the family like a storm. The stories warn of Gwizin who return to remind the living of their duties, their presence marked by cold drafts, flickering lights, and sudden, inexplicable misfortunes. They are not inherently malevolent, but their sadness carries a sharp edge, a reminder of the ties that bind even beyond death. One tale speaks of a young scholar who ignored the ancestral rites after his parents passed away. Consumed by ambition, he dismissed the rituals as superstitions, focusing instead on his studies. But as the months wore on, he began to notice strange occurrences. His ink would spill without cause, pages of his books would tear themselves in half, and whispers, soft but insistent, would echo through the night. Then came the dreams, visions of his mother, her face pale and drawn, her voice heavy with sorrow. "You have forgotten us," she said, her words cutting like glass. Overwhelmed by guilt and fear, the scholar finally performed the long-neglected rites, his trembling hands laying the offerings before her portrait. Only then did the disturbances cease. Not all ghosts in Korean mythology are tethered to family. Some are bound to places, their sorrow seeping into the walls and floors they once inhabited. There is a story of a Gwizin who haunted a school, her laughter echoing through empty hallways late at night. She was said to be the spirit of a young girl who had died in despair, her dreams of learning crushed by the weight of societal expectations. Those who passed the school after dark claimed to see her in the windows, her hand pressed against the glass, her expression a mix of longing and fury. Then there are the spirits known as Chienyo Gwizin, often depicted as the ghosts of unmarried women. In life, they were denied the societal role of wife and mother, and in death, they wander in search of closure. Their stories are laced with sadness, a reflection of the cultural expectations that shaped their lives. Yet, they are also figures of quiet defiance, their presence a reminder of the resilience of those who refuse to be forgotten. The annual Chuseok festival, a time of family gatherings and remembrance, holds special significance in this context. During the celebrations, families visit the graves of their ancestors, cleaning the sites and offering food to honor their spirits. The act is both solemn and joyful, a reaffirmation of the bond that transcends the boundaries of life and death. It is a time when the living and the dead share a table, their connection as real as the flicker of candlelight on a dark night. But what of the Gwizin who cannot be appeased, whose pain cuts too deep to be healed by ritual alone? Their stories remain as warnings, etched into the landscape of memory. They remind us of the weight of unspoken words, the cost of neglect, and the enduring power of grief. Each Gwizin carries a story, a life shaped by choices and circumstances that left an indelible mark. They are not just ghosts, they are mirrors, reflecting the lives of those who remember them and the culture that gave them form. The woman by the well, her figure now shrouded in mist, seemed to tilt her head once more. Did she hear the echo of her name whispered in the quiet? Or was it simply the wind, carrying with it the stories of all the Gwizin who roamed the night, their footsteps silent but their presence unmistakable? The village held its breath, the weight of her story lingering like the last trace of incense in the air. The jungle was alive with the hum of insects, the rustling of leaves, and the faint cries of unseen creatures. Yet, beneath the symphony of life, there was a quiet that made the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace, it was the kind that hinted at something watching, waiting. On a moonless night, near a lone banana tree, a shadow moved, not in the way shadows should, but with purpose, with hunger. Her long black hair flowed like dark water, her pale face luminous against the oppressive night. She was the Pontianak, and the air grew thick with the scent of frangipani flowers as she drew closer. Her story was whispered in every village, her name a warning on the lips of mothers and elders. A woman who had died in childbirth, her spirit was transformed by pain and betrayal into something vengeful. She was beautiful, achingly so, but her beauty was a mask for the horror she carried. Her soft laughter could draw you in, and before you knew it, she would strike, her claws ripping through flesh, her rage unquenchable. Men who wandered alone at night were her favorite prey, their screams swallowed by the jungle. Yet, some said she could be placated by a needle driven into the base of her neck, forcing her to remain human, her monstrous side trapped. Ghosts like the Pontianak aren't mere stories in Southeast Asia, they are woven into the very fabric of life. In Thailand, they speak of spirits who linger near the ancient temples of Chiang Mai, their presence palpable in the worn stone steps and the flicker of lanterns. One such spirit is the May Nak, a ghost who loved so fiercely that even death couldn't part her from her husband. They say she died in childbirth while her husband was away at war, but when he returned, she welcomed him with open arms, hiding her spectral nature until a chance encounter revealed the truth. The sight of her elongated arm stretching to pick up a dropped lime unnerved even the bravest heart. May Nak's story is one of love turned tragic, and even in her haunting, she is a figure of both fear and sympathy. In Malaysia, the tales take on a darker, more intimate tone with the Toyol, small, childlike spirits summoned by those desperate for wealth or revenge. They are often depicted as grotesque, with greenish skin and glowing eyes, their presence unnerving and cold. A toyol is bound to its master, doing their bidding in exchange for offerings of milk, toys, or even drops of blood. But such pacts are never without cost. The toyol's mischief could escalate, turning malicious if not carefully controlled. Its laughter, high-pitched and childlike, was said to echo through the night, a sound that froze the blood of those who heard it. The influence of animism is deeply ingrained in the ghost stories of Southeast Asia. In these cultures, the line between the living and the spirit world is thin, almost non-existent. The jungle itself is alive, teeming with spirits known as Hantu or Fai, guardians of nature who demand respect. Trees, rivers, and rocks are not merely objects but homes to beings who can bless or curse depending on how they are treated. This belief seeps into every story, every ritual, turning the natural world into a stage where the spirits dance. The traditions of these lands teach reverence and caution. Offerings are made to appease restless spirits, and rituals are performed to cleanse places of their haunting. It's said that in Indonesia, travelers often carry protective charms or recite prayers before venturing into dense forests or abandoned buildings. These are not mere superstitions, but acts of survival in a world where the supernatural is always near. One chilling tale speaks of a fisherman in a small coastal village in Indonesia. He was returning from the sea late at night, his boat heavy with the day's catch, when he saw a woman standing at the edge of the mangroves. Her face was turned away, her long hair hiding her features. Feeling a pang of concern, he called out to her, asking if she needed help. She turned slowly, and what he saw drove him to madness. Her face was hollow, her eyes dark voids that seemed to pull at his soul. The villagers found his boat the next morning, empty except for the faint scent of decayed flowers. These stories aren't just meant to scare, they teach lessons about respect, loyalty, and the consequences of greed or betrayal. They serve as reminders that the world is not ours alone, that there are forces beyond our understanding that must be honored. The haunted spirits of Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia each carry their own distinct personalities, their own tragedies, and their own warnings. They are not merely the stuff of nightmares, they are reflections of the human condition, of love and loss, greed and guilt. As the banana tree sways in the midnight breeze, or the faint sound of a child's laughter echoes in the distance, the tales live on, carried by the voices of those who dare to remember. The mist rolled in thick over the moor, each tendril curling like a ghostly hand. The air was still, yet it hummed with an invisible energy, as if the land itself was alive and watching. Beneath the ancient oak trees, their gnarled branches like skeletal arms, the world felt different. Time moved strangely there, and whispers carried on the wind seemed to speak in tongues long forgotten. It was a place of thresholds, where the seen and unseen met, a place where spirits roamed freely and the veil between worlds was as thin as gossamer. In the heart of Celtic lore, the otherworld was not a distant place of fantasy, it was an ever-present, shadowy realm layered upon the mortal world. It was where the dead lingered, where fairies danced, and where banshees wailed their mournful cries. The living and the dead were not divided by great chasms, but by a threadbare curtain that could be pulled aside in moments of magic, misfortune, or fate. The Banshee, or Bean City, was one such spirit that walked this liminal space. Her keening was said to echo through the night, a haunting lament that foretold death. She could be heard before she was seen, a long, mournful wail that seemed to pierce the soul. For those who heard her cry, it was a warning, a harbinger of loss that could not be outrun. Legends describe her as both terrifying and tragic. Sometimes she appeared as an old crone with silver hair and eyes clouded by centuries of sorrow. At other times, she was young, her beauty otherworldly, her hair like silk, but her expression one of unbearable grief. She wasn't an evil presence, but one bound to her role, tethered to families she had watched for generations. To some, she was a guardian, her cries an act of mourning for a death yet to come. To others, her presence was a cruel reminder of the fragility of life. The banshee's cries weren't the only sounds of the otherworld. The gentle laughter of fairies could lure travelers off safe paths, leading them into the unknown. Fairies in Celtic belief were not the playful creatures of modern imagination but complex, unpredictable beings tied to the natural world. Some were kind, their touch bringing healing and prosperity. Others were capricious, taking offense at the smallest slight and exacting punishment with a ferocity that belied their size. These fairies were closely linked to ghosts and spirits, inhabiting the same ethereal spaces where human souls lingered. They lived in mounds of earth, standing stones, and ancient trees. To disturb these sacred places was to invite their wrath. Farmers left offerings of milk and bread to appease them, and travelers carried iron for protection against their mischief. The connection between the living and these spirits was strongest during Samhain, the festival marking the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark half of the year. On that night, the barrier between worlds thinned almost to nothing. Fires were lit to ward off malevolent beings, and food was left out for wandering souls. It was a time to honor ancestors, to listen for their whispers on the wind, and to fear the spirits who did not come in peace. Nature itself was sacred in Celtic belief. Every tree, every river, and every stone had a spirit, a presence that demanded respect. The oak, mighty and wise, was thought to be a gateway to the otherworld. The yew, with its dark, twisted branches, was a symbol of death and rebirth, its roots said to drink from the waters of the underworld. To walk among such trees was to walk in the company of spirits, to feel their watchful gaze. One story tells of a hunter who strayed too far into the forest on a cold autumn night. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he felt a chill that had little to do with the weather. A figure appeared before him, luminous and unearthly, her eyes pools of sorrow. She was a banshee, her voice rising in a wail that made the blood in his veins turn cold. When he returned home, he found his brother gravely ill, his life slipping away like water through his hands. The banshee's cry had not lied, her mournful song was a prophecy fulfilled. The Celtic otherworld wasn't just a place for the dead, but a realm of possibilities, where the laws of the mortal world no longer held sway. Time flowed differently there, a single night stretching into centuries or passing in the blink of an eye. Heroes of legend often ventured into this mystical plane, drawn by its beauty and peril. Yet, few who entered returned unchanged. The spirits of the otherworld were not always hostile. Sometimes they guided the living, offering wisdom or aid in times of great need. They were intertwined with human lives, their presence a reminder of the mysteries that lay just beyond sight. The wind sighed through the moor, carrying with it the scent of earth and rain. In the distance, a flicker of light appeared, dancing like a will-o'-the-wisp. Was it a trick of the eye, or was it a spirit, a guardian of the otherworld beckoning the curious and the brave? To follow was to risk everything, but to ignore it was to miss the chance to touch something extraordinary. In the stories passed down through generations, the otherworld wasn't a place to fear but to respect. Its spirits, whether banshees, fairies, or ghosts, were woven into the fabric of the land itself. They were as much a part of the world as the rivers and hills, their presence a reminder of the thin line between the seen and unseen, the living and the dead. The candle flickered violently in the stillness, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the cold stone walls of the chamber. The air was heavy, carrying the faint, acrid smell of burning wax and something else, something damp, like the scent of earth freshly unearthed from a grave. Outside, the mournful toll of a church bell marked the hour, and in the distance, a wolf howled, its cry carrying an eerie echo that pierced the night. Beneath the dim light, the priest clutched his rosary, whispering prayers against the darkness. But even his whispered faith seemed powerless to stop the chill creeping through the room. Ghosts in the Middle Ages were not mere tales to frighten children, they were part of the fabric of daily life. Every corner of that shadowed world seemed to hide an unseen presence, and every whisper of wind or creak of wood was imbued with the possibility of the otherworldly. To believe in ghosts was not an act of folly, it was to accept the unshakable truth that the soul's journey did not always end with death. The spirits of the dead were thought to walk the earth for many reasons. Some returned out of love or duty, bound by promises unfulfilled. Others roamed in anguish, trapped by sins unconfessed or grudges too heavy to lay down. These were restless ghosts, caught between the worlds of the living and the dead, searching for peace that seemed forever out of reach. Their presence was not silent, knocks on doors in the dead of night, spectral footsteps echoing down empty halls, or disembodied voices pleading for absolution. The church held a firm grip on the narrative of the afterlife, shaping ghost stories into lessons of morality and faith. Spirits were often cast as souls suffering in purgatory, their torment a consequence of sins left unresolved. The living were called to offer prayers, to burn candles, and to give alms for these wandering souls. In this way, the departed and the living were tied together, bound by threads of guilt, redemption, and obligation. But not all ghosts were the souls of the repentant. The malevolent dead, fueled by anger or vengeance, were feared as harbingers of doom. These were the spirits who dragged chains behind them, their hollow eyes blazing with unearthly fire. They were said to haunt crossroads and graveyards, places where the boundary between the worlds was thinnest. To encounter one was to face the very essence of despair. It was not just the dead that haunted medieval Europe. Witches, too, became central to the fear of the unknown. As famine, disease, and war swept across the land, people sought answers, scapegoats for their suffering. The old woman with the milky eye, the midwife whose herbs healed too quickly, or the reclusive man who whispered to the trees, these were the figures who drew suspicion. The witch hunts were born from this fear. It was believed witches consorted with demons, wielding their dark powers to harm the innocent and disrupt the divine order. Stories spread like wildfire, women riding the night sky on broomsticks, covens dancing under the full moon, their chants calling forth spirits from hell itself. To the frightened masses, witches and ghosts became intertwined, both serving as manifestations of a battle between good and evil. The church declared this war spiritual. Exorcisms became spectacles, priests armed with holy water and crucifixes battling the invisible forces that clung to the possessed. The rites were dramatic, filled with cries and convulsions, the air thick with the stench of sulfur and the metallic tang of fear. To witness an exorcism was to see the fight for a soul laid bare, the line between salvation and damnation precariously thin. Yet, amidst the terror, there was also a fascination. Ghost stories were whispered in the safety of firelight, the flickering flames painting faces with awe and dread. These tales spoke of castles haunted by knights who failed their oaths, or of weeping maidens who lingered by the rivers where they had taken their lives. Every village had its ghost, every family its tale of an ancestor who returned. One legend told of a woman who, mourning her lost child, roamed the woods by night, her white gown glowing in the darkness. Her sobs echoed through the trees, her grief a beacon to those who ventured too close. They said if you met her gaze, you would feel her pain, an overwhelming sadness that would lead you to your own doom. Another tale warned of a specter known as the Black Rider. Appearing on stormy nights, he galloped through villages, his steed's hooves striking sparks against the cobblestones. To see him was to know death was near, for he came to claim the souls of the damned. These stories were not mere entertainment, they were warnings, shaped by faith and fear. They taught lessons about loyalty, honesty, and the consequences of turning from God. They reminded the living of their fragile place in the grand, celestial order. The Christian influence on ghost tales was unmistakable. Saints and sinners, angels and demons, heaven and hell, all played their parts in the narratives of the Middle Ages. Miraculous apparitions of the Virgin Mary or the sudden, divine intervention of a saint offered hope, while the grim specter of the devil served as a cautionary reminder of sin's wages. As the candle burned low in that darkened room, the priest felt the oppressive weight lift, as if the unseen had been satisfied. Yet, even as he crossed himself and whispered thanks, he knew the battle between light and dark was far from over. It lingered in every shadow, in every whispered tale, and in the hearts of those who dared to listen. The clock struck midnight, each chime ringing out like a mournful reminder of something forgotten, something lost in the folds of time. The room was bathed in a dim, flickering glow from the hearth, shadows pooling in the corners like silent watchers. Outside, a thick mist wrapped itself around the streets of Victorian London, muffling footsteps and hiding secrets that should have remained buried. Within these shadows and silence, ghosts stirred, not merely the specters of the dead but the echoes of a society grappling with its own fears and obsessions. Victorian England was a time when the air itself seemed saturated with the supernatural. Death lingered everywhere, a constant companion in a world where disease and poverty claimed lives too soon. Yet, for the Victorians, death was not the end but a doorway. The veil between the living and the dead felt thin, and ghost stories became both a mirror to their fears and a window into the unknown. It was in this atmosphere that the works of authors like Charles Dickens emerged, weaving the supernatural into the everyday. Dickens's ghosts were not faceless terrors but messengers, bringing with them lessons wrapped in eerie encounters. A Christmas Carol gave us the unforgettable image of Jacob Marley, his face contorted in regret, his chains clanking with the weight of his greed. Marley's ghost was more than a specter, he was a haunting embodiment of choices made and consequences endured. His hollow voice, trembling with sorrow, warned Scrooge, and by extension, all of us, about the dangers of a life lived without compassion. But Dickens was not alone in his fascination with the otherworldly. M.R. James tipped the genre into darker, more unsettling territories, crafting tales where the ghosts were not teachers but terrors. His stories crept under the skin, lingering long after the last page was turned. And oh, whistle, and I'll come to you, my lad, the soft rustling of unseen hands and the relentless pursuit of an otherworldly figure became the stuff of nightmares. James's ghosts were rarely benign, they were vengeful, restless, and disturbingly tangible. They reached out from their graves to remind the living of secrets better left undisturbed. Henry James, too, brought his own brand of spectral storytelling, blending psychological depth with haunting ambiguity. The Turn of the Screw remains a masterpiece of tension and uncertainty, its ghosts as much a reflection of the narrator's mind as they are actual apparitions. The pale figures glimpsed at the edges of perception, the oppressive atmosphere of Bly Manor, and the silent, suffocating dread that pervades the tale. All of it left readers questioning not just the existence of ghosts, but the fragility of human sanity. Victorian Gothic literature did more than scare, it shaped the very way ghosts were imagined. The settings were as much a character as the spirits themselves. Crumbling mansions, fog-drenched moors, and winding staircases provided the perfect backdrop for hauntings. These places, with their air of decay and mystery, seemed to breathe with the memories of those who had passed, their whispers caught in the creak of floorboards and the sigh of wind through broken windows. Ghosts in Victorian Gothic stories were rarely straightforward. They carried with them the weight of unresolved grief, hidden sins, and unspoken desires. They were the shadows of repression in a society bound by strict moral codes. The Victorians, so rigid in their outward respectability, used ghost stories to explore the forbidden, to give voice to the fears and longings that their everyday lives suppressed. Consider the ghostly woman in white, a recurring figure in many Victorian tales. She was often a symbol of betrayal or lost love, her pale form drifting through the pages as a reminder of passion turned to tragedy. Her story was not just one of death but of injustice, her haunting a demand for the truth to be revealed. But it wasn't just the wealthy or the literary elite who were captivated by these tales. Ghost stories transcended class, reaching into the hearths of the working poor and the drawing rooms of the aristocracy. Penny dreadfuls, a type of cheap serialized fiction, brought macabre tales to the masses, their lurid descriptions of spectral figures and ghastly deeds sparking both fear and fascination. Ghosts in Victorian England were more than just literary devices, they became part of the culture. Seances were held in dimly lit parlors, with mediums claiming to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. The room would fall silent as a table creaked or a candle flickered, the gathered guests holding their breath, hoping, or fearing, that a spirit might make itself known. This era's obsession with ghosts was deeply tied to the spiritual and scientific shifts of the time. The rise of spiritualism, with its promises of contact with the departed, offered comfort to those grieving lost loved ones. At the same time, advancements in technology and science challenged old beliefs, creating a tension between faith and reason. Ghost stories thrived in this space, reflecting the unease of a world caught between the certainty of the past and the uncertainties of the future. In the works of Dickens, James, and others, ghosts were more than a chilling presence. They were reflections of humanity's deepest fears and desires, embodiments of guilt, love, and the unrelenting passage of time. They stood at the threshold of life and death, their spectral hands reaching out to remind the living of what was lost and what might still be found. And in the dim glow of a Victorian parlor, as the shadows lengthened and the hour grew late, those who listened to their tales felt the undeniable truth: the dead are never truly gone. The fire crackled weakly in the hearth, its flickering light casting distorted shapes against the wooden walls of the cabin. Outside, the wind howled through the dense woods, carrying with it whispers that sounded almost like voices. In the stillness of the night, it was easy to believe the tales told in hushed tones over meals or whispered into the ears of children who couldn't sleep. Ghosts were not stories here. They were warnings, lessons, and reminders that the past lingered, alive and restless. Colonial America was a land haunted in more ways than one. The settlers carried with them the spectral traditions of Europe, where phantoms served as omens and harbingers. But this was a new land, with its own stories etched into the soil and the forests. The Native Americans spoke of spirits that moved through the trees, unseen but felt, their presence as much a part of the landscape as the rivers and mountains. The settlers, isolated and vulnerable in their unfamiliar surroundings, began to hear those whispers too, merging their fears with the ones that had already taken root here for centuries. In the flickering light of the fire, a man would speak of a figure seen at the edge of the woods, too pale to be living, its eyes burning with a strange light. They called it the White Lady, a ghost said to wander near the settlements, her mourning cries warning of approaching misfortune. She was not the only one. Stories spread of spectral soldiers, doomed to march eternally along invisible paths, their weapons clanging faintly in the night. These were the echoes of battles fought long ago, their pain reverberating through the fabric of the land. European influences shaped many of these tales, the settlers bringing with them beliefs in restless spirits and purgatory. Yet here, those ideas took on a new, untamed form. The wilderness itself seemed alive, a place where the line between the natural and the supernatural blurred. Ghosts did not merely haunt buildings or graveyards, they were part of the very air, their presence woven into the fabric of the New World. Among the settlers' stories were those of poltergeists, spirits said to torment families by throwing objects, knocking on walls, or creating unsettling noises. One of the earliest recorded tales spoke of a young girl who claimed to see a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed each night. Her cries filled the house, and her family watched helplessly as unseen forces overturned furniture and extinguished candles. The story spread, and the small settlement became gripped by fear. Was this punishment for sins left unconfessed? Or was it something older, something tied to the land itself? The influence of Native American spirituality also shaped the settlers' understanding of ghosts. Native traditions spoke of the spirits of ancestors who lingered not out of malevolence but to guide and protect. Yet, they also warned of restless spirits, those who met violent ends or failed to find peace in death. These tales often included warnings: never disturb the burial grounds, never forget to honor the spirits of the land. The settlers, unfamiliar with these customs, would sometimes violate these taboos, and when misfortune followed, failed crops, illness, or mysterious disappearances, they would whisper of the vengeful spirits they had angered. The colonial era also gave rise to ghost tales tied to morality and faith. Ministers often wove stories of hauntings into their sermons, warning that the dead might rise to remind the living of their moral failings. In one infamous tale, a man who cheated his neighbors was said to be visited by the ghost of his deceased wife, her hollow eyes staring into his soul as she whispered, "Repent." These stories served as both entertainment and moral lessons, their eerie details ensuring they would be remembered and retold. One of the most chilling tales from this time involved a small settlement on the edge of a dense forest. The settlers spoke of a child who went missing one stormy night, only to reappear days later, wandering out of the woods with vacant eyes. He could not explain where he had been, but he clutched a strange object, a small carved figure, that no one recognized. That night, the child began to speak in a language no one understood, his voice not his own. The settlers were terrified, believing the boy had been touched by a spirit or worse, taken over by one. The story became a cautionary tale, warning children to stay close to their families and to never venture into the forest after dark. And then there were the ghost stories that bore the unmistakable marks of tragedy. Tales of women who died during childbirth, their cries heard in the dead of night, or men who perished in icy rivers, their spectral forms seen wandering the banks, dripping with water that never dried. These stories, though eerie, were steeped in the sorrow of lives cut short and dreams left unfulfilled. The blending of European and Native American beliefs created a tapestry of ghost folklore that was uniquely American. The spirits of the dead were not distant or abstract, they were immediate, personal, and tied to the harsh realities of survival in an unforgiving land. Every creak of the floor, every gust of wind, carried with it the possibility of the supernatural. And for the settlers, this was both terrifying and comforting, a reminder that they were not alone, that the past was always with them, watching and waiting. The moon hung heavy over the sprawling fields of a southern plantation, casting a cold silver light across the moss-draped trees and weathered wooden steps. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the echoes of an unspoken past. The faint sound of footsteps moved across the veranda, though no one was there to make them. A soft, mournful hum rose from the shadows, a melody that spoke of loss, defiance, and a longing to be free. In the American South, the ghosts are not just stories, they are history, unresolved and alive. Plantations, with their grandeur built on the backs of unimaginable suffering, seem to hold the weight of countless spirits. These places are haunted not only by the dead but by the memories of what occurred there. One legend tells of the Myrtles plantation in Louisiana, where a slave named Chloe is said to wander the grounds, her face partially hidden by a tignon. Some say she was punished for eavesdropping, others claim her spirit lingers to protect the children she accidentally poisoned. Visitors speak of her presence, of the faint scent of magnolia that lingers in the air, and of her reflection caught in mirrors where she doesn't belong. The Civil War, with its fields soaked in blood and its skies darkened by gunpowder, gave rise to spirits bound by their final moments. Soldiers, young and old, wander battlegrounds, their uniforms tattered, their faces grim. On foggy nights in Gettysburg or Chickamauga, faint voices call out orders, musket shots ring through the still air, and spectral armies replayed battles that never truly ended. These are not mere phantoms, they are echoes of lives lost in the most violent and desperate hours, soldiers who cannot leave their duty behind. Yet, among the Southern ghost tales, none are as poignant as those rooted in African American folklore. These stories, born from the oral traditions of enslaved people, speak of resilience and resistance in the face of unspeakable hardship. Spirits in these tales are protectors, messengers, or warnings. One such legend tells of haints, restless spirits that sought to harm the living. But even in death, there was power. To keep these spirits at bay, people painted their doorways and window frames haint blue, a color believed to confuse or repel ghosts. Another story speaks of the Boo Hag, a skinless creature that slipped into homes at night, riding the chests of sleeping victims to steal their energy. But the Boo Hag was no ordinary ghost, it was a reminder of the balance between fear and cleverness. To outsmart the Boo Hag, victims would place a broom by their beds, forcing the creature to count the bristles until dawn. These tales, though chilling, carried wisdom and the belief in the power of cunning and courage. In the quiet corners of plantations, there are whispers of the whipping tree and the spirits of those who suffered beneath its branches. Their cries can still be heard on stormy nights, their pain etched into the land. These are not tales told for fright, they are reminders of a history that cannot be forgotten. For the descendants of enslaved people, these ghosts are family, a connection to ancestors who endured and resisted. Some stories, like that of the Bell Witch in Tennessee, blur the line between ghost and legend. A malevolent presence tormented the Bell family in the early 19th century, speaking in disembodied voices, moving objects, and even attacking family members. The spirit claimed to be the ghost of Kate Batts, a neighbor who had vowed vengeance. The tale of the Bell Witch spread far and wide, her name whispered around campfires and in darkened rooms. The southern landscape itself seemed steeped in the supernatural, as if the rivers and swamps hold memories that refuse to fade. In Charleston, South Carolina, tales of the Gray Man persist, a ghostly figure seen walking the beach before hurricanes, warning locals of impending danger. To those who heed his warning, he brings safety. To those who ignore it, only ruin. Haunted mansions, Civil War cemeteries, and abandoned juke joints, each carries its own stories. In Savannah, Georgia, where cobblestone streets wind through the historic district, almost every building has its ghost. The Kehoe House, once a funeral home, is said to echo with the laughter of unseen children. Bonaventure Cemetery, with its moss-covered statues, feels alive with the spirits of those who rest there. These ghost stories are more than entertainment. They are a way of preserving history and keeping the past close. They speak of love, loss, betrayal, and redemption. They honor the resilience of those who endured, the bravery of those who resisted, and the pain of those who were taken too soon. The ghosts of the American South remind us that the past is never truly gone. It lingers, watching, waiting, and whispering its truths to those willing to listen. A single drumbeat echoed through the night, sharp and deliberate, as if it was calling out to something unseen. The flames of a fire danced wildly under the vast African sky, shadows twisting and contorting like restless spirits. Around the fire, elders whispered stories, ancient and alive, their words charged with the weight of generations. They spoke of ancestors who walked among the living, not as memories, but as guardians, watching, guiding, and, at times, warning. In the silence between their words, it was easy to believe those spirits were listening. In many African cultures, the dead never truly leave. The spirits of ancestors remain woven into the fabric of life, their presence as real as the stars above. These spirits, revered and respected, are not just figures of the past, they are an enduring part of the present. A child's laughter, a bountiful harvest, or even a sudden illness can be seen as their work. When a family gathers to pour libations or light candles, they are speaking to those who came before, inviting them into the circle, seeking their blessings or their forgiveness. But not all spirits are content to be silent protectors. There are stories of those who linger with unfinished business, spirits who wander in the liminal space between the worlds. In the forests of Ghana, people speak of the Sasabansum, a fearsome figure that resides in the treetops, waiting to snatch unwary travelers. With iron teeth and twisted limbs, it is said to punish those who stray too far from the path. Yet, in its monstrous form lies a warning, a reminder of the dangers that lurk when one forgets respect for the land and its unseen inhabitants. In Nigeria, tales of the Abiku haunt the imaginations of many. These are children born with a cruel fate, destined to die young and return to be born again, bringing grief to their families over and over. Some say the Abiku are spirits who choose to torment the living, while others believe they are trapped, unable to break free of their cycle. Mothers tie protective charms around their children's wrists, hoping to outwit the spirit and keep their babies safe. The sight of those tiny talismans can bring a lump to the throat, a testament to love defying even the most relentless sorrow. Further south, in the shadow of the Zambezi River, the Tokalash creeps into stories whispered late at night. Small and mischievous, the Tokalash is often blamed for misfortunes ranging from stolen food to sudden deaths. Beds are raised high on bricks to keep this cunning spirit from reaching its victims. While some laugh at its antics, others speak in hushed tones, their eyes darting to the corners of the room, as if they expect to see its shadow. Among the Zulu people, the idea of the Amafufiana sends shivers through the spine. These spirits are believed to possess individuals, driving them to madness or despair. To those who witness it, possession is not just a state of mind, it is an invasion, an unseen force that takes hold and refuses to let go. Traditional healers, known as sangomas, are called to perform rituals to expel the spirit, their chants and dances a fierce battle against the darkness. Yet, even in these tales of fear and anguish, there is a thread of reverence. Spirits, whether benevolent or malevolent, are not mere ghosts, they are intertwined with the living, a reflection of humanity's connection to the unseen. Ancestral spirits, in particular, hold a sacred place. They are teachers and guides, the bridges between the worlds. Their voices come in dreams, their presence felt in the rustling of leaves or the sudden stillness of the air. To neglect them is to risk their anger, but to honor them is to invite their wisdom and protection. One story from Kenya tells of the wandering woman, a spirit who walks the roads at night, searching for her lost child. Those who encounter her say she looks like any other traveler until she turns her gaze upon you, her eyes pools of sorrow and rage. If you do not offer her help or kindness, it is said she will follow you home, her cries haunting your nights. Yet, those who listen to her tale and treat her with compassion may find themselves blessed, her gratitude a gift that lingers long after she has vanished into the darkness. In the bustling markets of Senegal, the griots, keepers of history, share stories of the jinn. These spirits, neither wholly good nor evil, are said to live alongside humans, invisible but ever-present. They can grant wishes, but their gifts come at a price. A careless word or a broken promise can unleash their wrath, their vengeance swift and unyielding. And yet, they are also protectors, watching over those who honor their traditions and respect their power. Perhaps the most poignant tales are those that speak of the living and the dead sharing a moment, a connection that transcends the boundaries of life and death. A father who feels his son's hand on his shoulder long after the boy has passed. A mother who dreams of her daughter's laughter, hearing it echo in the wind when she wakes. These moments, fleeting and bittersweet, remind us that love is the strongest bond of all. As the drumbeat fades and the fire burns low, the night carries the weight of these stories. They are not just tales of ghosts, they are expressions of life, of loss, and of an unyielding belief in the unseen. They speak to the heart, pulling at emotions too raw to name. In every rustle of leaves, and every breath of wind, the spirits remain, watching, waiting, and reminding us of the delicate thread that connects us all. A faint wail drifted through the night, carried by the wind over moonlit waters. It was a sound that stopped hearts and raised goosebumps, a lament so haunting it seemed to echo from the bones of the earth itself. The people of the village whispered her name, their voices trembling with both reverence and fear, La Llorona. They said she roamed the rivers, her eyes hollow with sorrow, her cries searching endlessly for the children she lost. Those who heard her knew to turn away, to never meet her gaze, for to see La Llorona was to invite despair, and perhaps, death. The story of La Llorona is etched into the fabric of Latin American folklore, her grief a mirror to the pain of loss and regret. She is not a simple ghost, but a reminder of choices made, of lives altered by love, anger, and tragedy. They say she was once a beautiful woman who fell deeply in love, but her heart was shattered by betrayal. In a moment of rage, or perhaps madness, she drowned her children in the river, only to be consumed by unbearable remorse. Now, she is cursed to wander forever, her cries piercing the night, searching for the souls she cast into the depths. But La Llorona is just one face of the spirits that haunt Latin American traditions. Across the lands, the veil between the living and the dead feels thinner, as if the spirits are always near, walking alongside us, unseen but felt. On Dia de los Muertos, this connection becomes undeniable. Altars bloom with vibrant marigolds, their scent said to guide the spirits of loved ones back to the world of the living. Candles flicker in homes and cemeteries, casting soft light on photos of the departed. Plates of their favorite food sit waiting, offerings of love and memory. For those who observe the Day of the Dead, the air is heavy with emotion, not of fear, but of longing. It is a time to welcome the dead, to remember them not with tears, but with joy. Families laugh as they tell stories of their loved ones, their voices mingling with the hum of life. Yet beneath the surface lies a quiet understanding, the dead are not gone. They are here, listening, smiling, and perhaps shedding their own unseen tears. This mingling of life and death, of joy and sorrow, is at the heart of Latin American ghost lore. Catholicism brought by Spanish colonizers merged with the indigenous beliefs already rooted in the soil, creating a complex tapestry of spirits and saints, of penance and power. The church offered explanations for the restless dead, tying ghost stories to sins and redemption, but the indigenous traditions offered something deeper, a sense that the spirit world is not separate but intertwined with the physical one. In Mexican culture, La Santa Muerte, the Holy Death, is both feared and venerated. Often depicted as a skeletal figure draped in flowing robes, she is a saint to many, granting protection and blessings to those who honor her. To outsiders, her image might seem macabre, but to her devotees, she is a comforting presence, a reminder that death is not an end but a transformation. In the Andes, the indigenous belief in APU spirits, mountain deities, blends with Catholic rituals. These spirits, powerful and watchful, are said to guard the land and the people who respect them. Yet, they can also be vengeful if neglected or wronged, their wrath manifesting in storms or misfortune. Offerings of coca leaves and prayers are given to appease them, a delicate balance between fear and faith. Throughout Latin America, ghost stories are often deeply personal, tied to families and communities. In Colombia, tales of El Sombrerón, a shadowy figure with a wide-brimmed hat, send chills through those who hear them. He is said to wander the roads at night, his presence an omen of doom. In Guatemala, people warn of the Siguanaba, a spirit who appears as a beautiful woman, luring men to their doom with her haunting allure. But when they draw close, her face transforms into something monstrous, a reminder that beauty can hide danger. Even the land itself holds ghosts. The ruins of Mayan and Aztec cities speak of lives lost to time, of sacrifices made to gods now silent. The wind through the stone seems to carry voices, whispers of rituals and prayers, of laughter and cries. It is said that the spirits of warriors and priests still walk these ancient sites, their footsteps unseen but their presence undeniable. Perhaps the most poignant ghost stories are those tied to love and loss. A widow lighting a candle in a darkened church, her lips murmuring a prayer for a husband long gone. A child leaving a toy on a grave, hoping their sibling might somehow see it from the other side. These moments, small and profound, speak to the enduring connection between the living and the dead. And then there are the spiritist traditions, brought to life by figures like Allan Kardec, whose teachings found fertile ground in Latin America. Spiritism offers a framework for understanding ghosts not as malevolent forces, but as souls seeking guidance or redemption. Mediums, sitting quietly with eyes closed, listen to the voices of the departed, their messages bridging the gap between worlds. To those who believe, it is not just a ritual, it is a lifeline, a way to find closure, forgiveness, or hope. In every corner of Latin America, ghost stories pulse with life, their edges tinged with the bittersweet. They are not merely tales of fear, but of connection, between the past and present, between the seen and unseen. They remind us that the dead are not truly gone, that they linger in the spaces we leave for them, in the prayers we whisper, in the love we carry. As the night deepens and the candles burn low, the ghosts of Latin America remain. They move through the rivers and forests, through the streets and the ruins, their presence woven into the very air. They are not just stories, they are part of what it means to be human, to hold on to memory and let it shape us, even as we let it go. And in their cries, in their whispers, we hear echoes of our own hearts, beating through the long, silent night. The fire crackled, its light flickering against the backdrop of the silent forest. The night was alive with whispers, branches swayed in a slow, deliberate rhythm, and the air carried an unspoken promise of something just beyond sight. Around the fire, a storyteller's voice cut through the stillness, weaving a tale that seemed to belong as much to the trees and stars as it did to those gathered. It was a story about spirits, about ancestors who never truly left, and about the thin veil that separates the living from the supernatural. Among the Lakota, it is said that the spirits of the departed walk the earth, their presence felt in the wind, their voices hidden in the cries of animals. These spirits are not distant, they are part of the world, watching over their people, guiding them, and sometimes warning them. A rustle in the leaves, a sudden chill, these are signs that a spirit is near. The living know to respect these moments, to listen and understand, for the spirits speak not with words, but through the earth itself. There are stories of the Wendigo, a creature that stalks the northern forests, born of hunger and despair. It is said that those who give in to greed or gluttony may be consumed by this spirit, their humanity slipping away until they become something monstrous. But the Wendigo is not just a tale of fear, it is a lesson, a reminder of balance and the danger of losing oneself to selfishness. The wind through the trees seems to carry its warning, a low, mournful sound that chills the bone. And then there are the tricksters, spirits that defy understanding, their actions both playful and dangerous. Coyote, a figure in many Native American traditions, is one such trickster. He is clever and mischievous, a shapeshifter who blurs the line between the natural and the supernatural. Some say he brings wisdom in his chaos, teaching lessons through his antics, while others fear his unpredictable nature. To meet Coyote is to face the unknown, to be drawn into a world where nothing is as it seems. The spirits of ancestors hold a sacred place in these tales. They are protectors, guides, and keepers of wisdom. Among the Cherokee, it is believed that the spirits of the departed become part of the land, their energy infusing the mountains and rivers. A certain rock formation may hold the presence of a beloved elder, a stream may carry the laughter of children long gone. These spirits are not feared but honored, their memory living on in every sunrise and every blade of grass. Yet not all spirits are kind. There are those who linger with unfinished business, their restlessness turning them into shadows that haunt the living. The Navajo speak of Chindi, the angry spirit of someone who died in a state of turmoil or resentment. To encounter a Chindi is to feel a wave of unease, a chill that seems to seep into the soul. These spirits are a warning to live with integrity, to resolve conflicts before death, lest one's soul become trapped in bitterness. Nature itself is inseparable from these stories. A moonlit clearing, the roar of a distant waterfall, the rustling of a hawk's wings, these are not just settings but participants in the tale. Among the Haudenosaunee, or Iroquois, the connection between the natural world and the supernatural is profound. They believe that the earth is alive, its spirit present in every tree, every stone, every breath of wind. The spirits of the dead, too, are tied to this world, their presence felt in the changing seasons, and the whispers of the forest. There are sacred places where the veil between worlds is thinnest. A cave hidden deep in the mountains, a grove of ancient trees, a bend in a river where the water runs still, these are places where the spirits are said to gather. Those who visit these places do so with reverence, leaving offerings of tobacco or cornmeal, speaking prayers into the silence. To step into such a place is to feel the weight of history, of lives that have come before, of spirits that watch and wait. The Ojibwe tell of the Missipeshu, the great lynx, a water spirit that dwells in the depths of lakes. It is a creature of immense power, its body a mix of feline grace and reptilian menace. Missipeshu guards the waters, punishing those who disrespect them. To see its golden eyes shining beneath the surface is to know both awe and fear, a reminder that the natural world is not ours to command but to respect. In every story, there is a thread of connection, a sense that the living and the dead, the human and the spirit, are bound together in a dance that spans time. A hunter lost in the woods may find his way by following the flicker of a light, only to realize later that it was not a fire but a spirit guiding him home. A mother grieving her child might feel a soft hand on her shoulder, turn, and see nothing but the wind moving the leaves. Even the tricksters, with their chaos and cunning, remind us of this connection. They show us that life is not meant to be simple or predictable, that the supernatural is not a world apart but intertwined with our own. They challenge us to see the world with new eyes, to question what we think we know. These tales are not mere stories, they are truths, passed down through generations, shaping the way people see the world and their place within it. They are warnings, lessons, and comforts, offering a glimpse into a world where spirits walk alongside us, unseen but always present. They remind us to listen, to the wind, to the earth, to the silence between breaths, for it is in these spaces that the spirits speak. And in their whispers, we find the echoes of our own lives, tied forever to the land and to those who came before. A single candle flickered in the vast darkness of the cathedral, its fragile flame casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The air was thick, heavy with centuries of whispered prayers and secrets left unspoken. Somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of footsteps rang out, but the nave was empty, or so it seemed. Beneath the vaulted ceilings, where heaven and earth seemed to meet, the line between the mortal and the divine blurred. This was a place where spirits were said to linger, angels, demons, and the restless souls of the departed. In Christianity, death is not an end but a passage. The soul, eternal and unyielding, moves beyond the veil of life, its fate resting in the hands of a just and merciful God. But not every soul finds peace. Stories are told of wandering spirits, those caught between heaven and earth, unable to move on. These are not just tales of fear, but reflections of hope, of redemption, and of the eternal battle between light and darkness. Angels, the messengers of God, are said to be ever present, their wings unseen but their influence felt. They are guardians, protectors, and guides, appearing in moments of need. In hushed voices, people speak of encounters with these celestial beings. A mother, lost in despair, finds herself inexplicably comforted by a stranger whose touch brings warmth and peace, only to discover that no such person existed. A soldier, trapped in the chaos of war, hears a voice urging him to move just before a bullet strikes where he had been standing. Such stories leave no doubt in the minds of believers. Angels walk among us, their presence a testament to divine love. But for every angel, there is a demon. The fallen, those who turned away from God, roam the earth seeking to sow chaos and despair. The faithful tell of encounters that chill the soul, a shadow that moves where no light falls, a voice that whispers in the dead of night, promising power at a terrible cost. Exorcists, armed with prayer and the power of Christ, battle these dark forces, their faith their only weapon. The accounts of these struggles are not for the faint of heart. A child, her voice not her own, speaks in tongues long dead. Objects move of their own accord, and an icy cold fills the room despite a blazing fire. Such moments are a stark reminder of the spiritual warfare that rages unseen, where the stakes are nothing less than the soul itself. Then there are the saints, those whose lives were so touched by grace that their very existence seems to transcend mortality. Their stories often include miraculous apparitions, where their spirits appear to comfort or guide the living. Saint Francis of Assisi, long after his death, is said to have appeared to monks in distress, his presence a balm to their troubled hearts. Saint Teresa of Avila recounted visions of heavenly beings so vivid they left her trembling. These tales are not mere legends, they are woven into the fabric of Christian belief, testaments to the power of faith and the enduring connection between the living and the divine. But perhaps the most haunting tales are those of the restless dead, souls caught in purgatory, seeking the prayers of the living to ascend to heaven. In the medieval Christian world, the concept of purgatory loomed large, a place where souls purified themselves before entering paradise. It was believed that these souls could reach out to the living, their presence marked by strange occurrences, a soft knock on the door in the dead of night, a shadow flickering at the edge of vision, a voice calling out in sorrow. Those who heard these cries were compelled to pray, offering solace to the suffering and easing their journey to the light. Christian ghost stories are not confined to the extraordinary, they are rooted in the ordinary lives of believers. A woman, lighting a candle for her deceased husband, feels a sudden warmth envelop her, as though he is there beside her. A child, too young to understand death, speaks of playing with a shining man who comes only at night. Such moments are whispered about in families, passed down as quiet assurances that love endures beyond death. The influence of these stories stretches back through the ages, shaped by the teachings of the Church and the cultural fears of the time. During the Middle Ages, ghost stories often reflected the stark realities of life and death in a world ravaged by plague and war. The dead, unburied or forgotten, were believed to return as reminders of mortality and the need for repentance. These were not benevolent spirits, but harbingers of doom, their hollow eyes a mirror to the sins of the living. As time passed, the stories evolved, blending with local folklore and traditions. In some regions, the ghostly apparitions were less about fear and more about justice. A murdered victim might rise to reveal their killer, their spectral form an advocate for truth. In others, the dead returned to fulfill a promise or to protect a loved one from harm. These tales served as moral lessons, reminders of the power of forgiveness and the weight of one's actions. The Reformation brought its own changes, challenging the Catholic view of purgatory and reshaping the way people thought about the afterlife. Yet even then, ghost stories persisted, adapted to fit new beliefs. Protestant tales often depicted ghosts as manifestations of divine will, sent to guide or warn. They were no longer souls in need of prayers, but messengers of God's purpose, their presence a call to faith and righteousness. Through it all, the stories retained their power to captivate and to move. They speak to something universal, a longing to understand what lies beyond, to know that we are not alone, even in death. Whether it is the soft glow of an angel's light or the chilling touch of a malevolent spirit, these tales remind us of the unseen forces that shape our world. They challenge us to look beyond the veil of the ordinary, to find meaning in the mysteries that surround us, and to hold fast to the hope that even in darkness there is light. The night sky stretched endlessly over the desert, its silence broken only by the whisper of wind through the dunes. Somewhere far off, a call to prayer echoed, its haunting melody both a comfort and a reminder of forces unseen. Beneath the vast heavens, where stars flickered like the eyes of unseen watchers, stories of the supernatural felt closer, more real. Among these tales were whispers of beings older than humanity, creations of smokeless fire, and spirits who linger in the space between life and death. In the teachings of Islam, the unseen world is not merely the subject of speculation, it is an undeniable truth. The Quran speaks of the jinn, beings of immense power and mystery, created from smokeless fire and gifted with free will, like humans. They live unseen among us, their lives parallel yet separate. Some are benevolent, others malicious, and many indifferent to human affairs. But when their paths cross with ours, the consequences can be extraordinary. Stories are told of lonely travelers hearing strange laughter on deserted roads, of homes where objects move inexplicably, and of whispers in languages not of this world. These are said to be the work of jinn, creatures who can be protectors or tormentors. A man once claimed to have been saved from a deadly storm by a shadowy figure who vanished as suddenly as it appeared. Another tells of a family haunted by unexplainable occurrences, doors slamming, lights flickering, until an imam came to recite verses from the Quran, driving the presence away. Such tales are not merely folklore, they are woven into the fabric of belief, a reminder of the unseen forces that share our world. Yet, the supernatural in Islam is not confined to the jinn. Angels, beings of pure light, play a vital role. They are messengers, protectors, and witnesses to all deeds, their presence both comforting and humbling. Unlike jinn, they lack free will, serving only the divine will of Allah. Stories of angelic intervention often leave listeners awestruck. A woman, lost in grief after the death of her child, recounts a dream where a radiant figure reassured her, telling her that her child was in peace. Upon waking, she felt a profound sense of calm, as though touched by the divine. But it is the barzakh, the liminal space between life and the afterlife, that holds the most haunting resonance. This is the realm where souls wait, their fates not yet sealed, caught in a state of awareness and reflection. The barzakh is not a place of torment, but it is also not a place of ease, it is awaiting a reckoning. In this state, the souls of the deceased may reach out to the living, their presence felt in fleeting moments. A scent that lingers in an empty room, a voice heard in a dream, or an inexplicable feeling of being watched, all are attributed to those in the barzakh, reminding the living of their own mortality and the life yet to come. Islamic culture, rich in its diversity, is filled with ghost stories that reflect these beliefs. In some regions, tales of restless spirits who appear in search of justice are common. A murdered man, his soul unable to rest, is said to appear at the site of his death until his killer is brought to account. In others, the spirits of those who died suddenly or violently are believed to linger, their unresolved lives binding them to the earthly realm. These stories are not told to frighten but to teach, to remind believers of the importance of justice, mercy, and the fleeting nature of life. There are also tales of spirits who act as protectors, watching over their loved ones even after death. A mother, gone too soon, is said to have appeared to her child in a moment of danger, guiding them to safety. Such stories are told with reverence, a testament to the enduring bonds of love and the mercy of Allah, who allows such connections to persist. The Quran and Hadith offer guidance on how to interact with the supernatural, emphasizing the power of prayer, the recitation of verses, and the seeking of Allah's protection. These practices are not just spiritual, they are deeply practical, a way to confront the unknown with faith and courage. When fear grips the heart, believers turn to the words of the Quran, finding solace and strength in their recitation. It is said that even the most malevolent jinn cannot withstand the power of these sacred words, their influence banished by the light of divine truth. Among the most chilling tales are those of possession, where a jinn takes control of a human body, causing great suffering. In such cases, the afflicted turn to scholars and imams, whose prayers and rituals aim to free the victim. These exorcisms are intense, often involving the recitation of verses and the use of holy water. Witnesses speak of voices changing, unnatural strength, and a sense of oppressive darkness lifting only when the ritual is complete. These moments are a stark reminder of the fragile boundary between the seen and unseen, and the enduring power of faith in overcoming darkness. The supernatural in Islam is not a source of entertainment or casual curiosity. It is a reminder of the greater reality that lies beyond human understanding. The stories of jinn, angels, and spirits are not just tales, they are lessons, calls to reflection, and affirmations of the divine order. They speak to the eternal truths of life, death, and what lies beyond, urging believers to live with awareness, humility, and trust in the mercy of Allah. In the stillness of the night, when the world seems to hold its breath, these stories resonate most deeply. They remind us of the unseen forces that surround us, of the choices we make, and of the enduring connection between the mortal and the divine. Whether it is the flicker of a shadow, the whisper of a voice, or the warmth of an unseen hand, these moments touch something profound within us, leaving us both humbled and awed. In the dim light of dawn, a lone monk sat beneath a Bodhi tree, the stillness around him broken only by the soft rustle of leaves. His breath was steady, his eyes closed, yet within him a storm raged. It was said that the veil between the living and the dead thinned in moments of profound reflection, and as he sat there, he felt it, the unmistakable presence of something unseen. A chill brushed past, neither cruel nor kind, but a reminder of the countless lives, the countless deaths, that had brought him to this very moment. In Buddhist thought, the cycle of life and death is unending, a wheel spinning through samsara, the realm of suffering and existence. Ghosts are not an anomaly in this cycle, but an integral part of it. They are the spirits caught between worlds, their attachments and desires binding them to the life they once knew. They are neither purely malevolent nor benign, they are echoes of longing, fragments of lives unable to move forward. The Pitas, or hungry ghosts, embody this haunting sorrow. Their presence is felt most acutely in Southeast Asia, where belief in their existence shapes rituals and traditions. Descriptions of them vary. Some speak of shadowy, skeletal figures with distended bellies and tiny mouths, their hunger eternal and their ability to satiate it painfully limited. Others describe them as nearly invisible, flickering at the edges of sight, their mournful cries heard only in the dead of night. These ghosts are born of greed, anger, and ignorance in life, their suffering a poignant reminder of the weight of unwholesome actions. Stories abound of encounters with these restless spirits. In a quiet village in Thailand, an old woman spoke of seeing a figure at the edge of her rice field, its face drawn and eyes hollow. It didn't approach but lingered, its gaze fixed on her. She hurried home, lighting incense and offering rice to ease its torment. The next morning, the field was untouched, but she swore she could still feel its eyes. These tales are not meant to terrify but to teach, illustrating the consequences of unchecked desire and the importance of compassion. Compassion, after all, is at the heart of Buddhist practice. Offerings are made to ghosts not out of fear but out of a desire to help them move beyond their suffering. Food, incense, and prayers are given during festivals like the Ghost Festival, where entire communities come together to honor and aid these wandering souls. The air is thick with the scent of incense, the soft chants of monks creating an atmosphere both solemn and hopeful. It is believed that such acts of kindness can release these spirits from their torment, allowing them to continue their journey toward reincarnation and eventual enlightenment. Not all ghosts are born of suffering. Some linger out of love or duty, their presence a testament to the bonds they shared in life. A family in Cambodia tells of a father who passed away suddenly, his loss leaving an ache that refused to fade. They claim he visited them in dreams, his smile reassuring, his voice urging them to carry on. These encounters brought comfort, a reminder that love transcends even the boundary of death. In Buddhist teachings, the line between life and death is not rigid but fluid. Death is not an end but a transition, a step on the path to rebirth. The spirits of the dead, whether they are hungry ghosts or protective ancestors, are a reflection of the actions taken in life. A life of kindness and mindfulness leads to peace. A life of anger and greed can trap a soul, leaving it to wander. This understanding shapes how communities view and interact with the dead, their rituals infused with a sense of both reverence and responsibility. Beyond Southeast Asia, these beliefs resonate in other Buddhist cultures. In Japan, the Obon festival brings families together to honor their ancestors, lanterns floating on rivers to guide spirits back to the other side. The flickering lights on the water are like stars fallen to earth, their beauty tinged with the bittersweet knowledge of impermanence. Each lantern carries a name, a memory, a wish for peace. As they drift away, the living feel a connection that transcends time, a brief but profound reunion with those who have gone before. The spirits in these stories are not meant to frighten but to awaken a deeper understanding. They are reminders of life's fragility and the consequences of actions. They are teachers, pointing toward the truth of suffering and the possibility of liberation. In their presence, one cannot help but reflect on their own attachments, their own desires, and the steps they must take to break free from the cycle of samsara. In the silence of the temple, where the air is thick with the scent of incense and the soft murmur of chants, the weight of these stories can be felt. They are not relics of the past, but living truths, their lessons as relevant now as they were thousands of years ago. A candle flickers, its light casting long shadows, and for a moment, the boundary between the seen and unseen dissolves. The monk beneath the Bodhi tree opens his eyes, his heart heavy yet calm. The presence he felt is gone, but its lesson lingers. In the endless cycle of life and death, every moment is a chance to choose compassion, to ease suffering, to move closer to the light. The night was heavy, the kind of darkness that pressed against the skin and made every sound sharper, every shadow deeper. Beneath a sprawling baobab tree, a group of elders sat in a solemn circle, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm as old as time. They were calling out, not in fear, but in reverence. The air crackled with something unseen, a presence that made the hairs on the back of the neck stand on end. It was said that the ancestors had gathered, their unseen hands stretching across the chasm of time to touch the living. In traditional African religions, ancestors are far more than memories. They are guardians, protectors, and guides, their spirits as alive as the wind that rustles the tall grasses of the savanna. The relationship between the living and the dead is not severed by death, but transformed, woven into the fabric of everyday life. Ancestors are not simply spirits, they are family, their influence felt in the rhythms of the land, the fortunes of the harvest, and the whispered wisdom that comes in dreams. A man in Ghana once spoke of his grandmother, who had passed away many years before. Yet, he felt her presence constantly. When his crops failed, he dreamed of her guiding him to plant in a different field. When his child fell ill, he saw her shadow near the child's bed, her voice calming and reassuring. For him, she was not gone but shifted, her love and care extending beyond the boundaries of her earthly life. Ancestor worship is not about fear but respect. In many African communities, the ancestors are the link between humanity and the divine, their spirits acting as intermediaries who can carry prayers and blessings to higher powers. It is believed that their contentment ensures prosperity, while their anger can bring misfortune. Thus, rituals of honor and remembrance are vital. Offerings of food, drink, and song are given, not out of obligation but out of love, a gesture as natural as providing for one's parents in life. These rituals are often deeply personal yet profoundly communal. In a village in Nigeria, during a festival to honor the ancestors, the air fills with the beat of drums and the sound of laughter and song. Masks are worn, and the dancers move with a grace that feels otherworldly, their movements said to channel the spirits themselves. Fires burn bright, their smoke carrying messages to the heavens, while the stories of the ancestors are recounted, each word preserving the legacy of those who came before. Ghosts in these traditions are not the wailing, vengeful figures of other tales. They are familiar, comforting, their presence a source of strength. A young woman in South Africa recounted how, after her father's death, she felt his guidance in every major decision she made. When fear threatened to overwhelm her, she would hear his voice, gentle and steady, reminding her of her strength. To her, he was not a ghost but a constant companion, a reminder that she was never alone. In African spiritual systems, the bond with ancestors is deeply tied to the land. Each tree, each river, each stone holds a story, a connection to those who lived and walked before. It is believed that the spirits of the dead dwell in nature, their essence imprinted on the world they loved and cared for. A sacred tree in Tanzania is said to house the spirit of a powerful chief, its roots sprawling like the veins of the earth itself. Villagers leave offerings at its base, seeking guidance or expressing gratitude for blessings received. Not all spirits are benevolent, however. Just as in life, relationships with ancestors can be complex. Spirits who are forgotten or disrespected are thought to grow restless, their displeasure manifesting in small misfortunes or eerie signs. A family in Kenya told of strange occurrences, a cow refusing to give milk, sudden chills in the night, until they realized they had neglected to honor a long-departed relative. A feast was held in his memory, and the disturbances ceased, replaced by a sense of peace that seemed to settle over the home. This connection to ancestors extends across the continent, though the rituals and stories vary. Among the Zulu people, rituals to honor the Amidlozi, or ancestral spirits, often involve the burning of impefo, a sacred herb whose smoke is believed to summon the spirits. In Mali, the Dogon people tell intricate stories of their ancestors, their oral traditions mapping not just history but cosmology, tying the living to the stars themselves. These traditions are not relics of the past, but living, breathing practices. They provide a sense of identity and continuity, a way to navigate the challenges of life with the wisdom of generations behind you. The ancestors are there in moments of joy and sorrow, their presence felt in the sway of tall grasses, the warmth of the sun, and the coolness of the night breeze. In the quiet of the evening, as the fire burns low and the stories fade into the silence, there is a feeling that lingers, an unspoken knowing that the ancestors are watching, their love and guidance woven into the very fabric of existence. It is a bond that cannot be broken, a testament to the enduring power of family, memory, and faith. The candle flickered, casting long, quivering shadows on the cracked stone walls. Somewhere in the distance, a faint whisper curled through the silence, a sound too soft and fleeting to place. This was the kind of moment that made the heart race, the skin prickle, the mind conjure shapes from the dark. It was in moments like these that ghost stories found their power, haunting the pages of literature for centuries. From the first words of Shakespeare's Hamlet, the ghost of the slain king appears not just as a specter but as a force that shakes the living world. His hollow eyes seem to carry the weight of betrayal, his presence a chilling reminder of vengeance left undone. When the ghost speaks, there's a visceral pang in the air, a demand for justice that reverberates far beyond the stage. Shakespeare didn't just use ghosts to entertain, he wove them into the fabric of human struggle, making the supernatural an unflinching mirror of guilt, power, and the fragility of morality. Ghosts were not content to linger in the realm of plays. As the centuries turned, they seeped into novels, becoming both storytellers and symbols, haunting the minds of readers long after the last page was turned. In the heart of the Gothic era, ghost stories began to thrive, their tendrils wrapping around themes of loss, love, and the unspoken terrors of the human soul. The works of Mary Shelley, for instance, spoke to more than just science and horror. The specter of Frankenstein's creation was not a ghost in the traditional sense, but embodied the same unease, a living shadow of mistakes and regrets, its presence impossible to escape. The Gothic castles and eerie landscapes of the time became not just settings, but characters themselves, their echoing halls and hidden passageways holding secrets as sinister as any ghost. Authors like Edgar Allan Poe turned ghostly presences into psychological battles. In The Telltale Heart, the relentless beating of a heart beneath the floorboards becomes a ghost of guilt, hammering away at the fragile mind of the narrator. Poe's ghosts didn't need forms, they were whispers, hallucinations, shadows that spoke of madness and morality, unseen yet unavoidable. When the Romantic era swept through literature, ghosts took on a new form. They were no longer just terrifying apparitions, they became vessels of longing and melancholy. Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner carries a ghostly weight, not just in its imagery of spectral sailors, but in the haunting sorrow that lingers in every line. The sea itself feels alive, a vast, restless graveyard echoing with unseen spirits. And then came the Victorians, with their seances, mediums, and an obsession with the afterlife. Ghost stories became a way to question the rigid structures of belief and science. Charles Dickens, with his A Christmas Carol, brought ghosts into the light, using them to challenge greed and awaken the heart. The spectral visitors to Ebenezer Scrooge's chamber are vivid and unforgettable, each one tugging at different threads of his humanity. The ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, silent and menacing, doesn't speak a word, yet its presence chills more than any screen could. The Victorian love for ghost stories wasn't limited to moral lessons. Writers like M.R. James perfected the quiet, creeping dread that comes from the unexpected. In his tales, ghosts didn't announce themselves, they lingered in the edges of vision, emerging only when the moment was ripe for terror. A curtain moves when no wind blows, an object shifts with no visible touch, and suddenly, the ordinary becomes a nightmare. By the time modern horror fiction began to take root, ghosts had evolved into symbols as varied as the cultures that birthed them. In Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, the house itself seems alive, its ghostly presence a reflection of the psychological scars carried by its inhabitants. Jackson's ghosts are ambiguous. Are they real, or are they the manifestations of a crumbling mind? That tension, that blur between reality and the supernatural, is what makes her work so haunting. Modern writers have continued to push ghosts into new forms, their stories shaped by the anxieties of their time. In Toni Morrison's Beloved, the ghost of a child is both a memory and a force, haunting her mother in ways that are as much about love as they are about pain. Morrison's ghosts are deeply human, their presence a testament to the unshakable bonds between the living and the dead. Through centuries of literature, ghosts have been both a comfort and a curse, a reminder of the past and a warning for the future. They linger in the words of poets and novelists, their voices whispering through the pages. Their stories aren't just about the dead, they are about us, the living, and the way we grapple with the unseen forces that shape our lives. In the flicker of a candle, in the silence of a room just before sleep, ghosts in literature continue to breathe. They are there, waiting, not to scare us, but to remind us of what we fear, what we've lost, and what we can never quite leave behind. The house sat at the end of the overgrown lane, its windows black and lifeless. To the unsuspecting, it was merely a shell of a building, bricks and mortar left to decay. But those who dared step closer swore they felt it breathe. The air around it grew heavier, colder, as if the house itself were watching, waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to cross its threshold. The haunted house has always been more than wood and stone. It is alive, not in the sense of a beating heart, but in its ability to trap the past within its walls. Every creak of a floorboard, every draft that chills the skin, seems to whisper of those who came before. These houses hold their history like a curse, a weight that presses against anyone who dares to enter. In Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, the house isn't just haunted, it is the ghost. Its very architecture feels wrong, its angles askew, its halls bending the laws of perception. The house preys on its guests, slowly unraveling their minds, until the line between the supernatural and the psychological dissolves. The house feeds on loneliness, on grief, on fear, turning the cracks in its inhabitants' psyches into gaping chasms. The terror doesn't come from what is seen, but from the unbearable certainty that the house knows them intimately, and it will not let them leave unchanged. Stephen King's The Shining takes the haunted house motif to a place of chilling isolation. The Overlook Hotel, perched high in the Rockies, is grand and opulent, but beneath its glittering surface lies a malevolent hunger. It seduces and corrupts, preying on Jack Torrance's weaknesses until he becomes a vessel for its darkness. The Overlook is not merely haunted, it is insatiable, its ghost spilling into the present with violent intentions. The tension builds with every echoing footstep in its cavernous halls, every fleeting glimpse of a figure that shouldn't be there, until the reader feels as trapped as the Torrance family. But haunted houses aren't always grand estates or imposing hotels. They can be modest, unassuming places, their menace hidden in plain sight. In countless ghost stories, the house becomes a reflection of its inhabitants, a mirror that warps and magnifies their secrets and sins. A family moves in, thinking they can make it a home, but the house already knows them. It listens. It waits. Western literature has long used the haunted house as a stage where human fears play out. These houses aren't just settings, they are symbols of the inescapable past. They hold the echoes of trauma, of guilt, of love that turned sour. The walls seem to hum with the energy of what has been lost or destroyed, and the house itself becomes a character, its presence as vital as any ghost that walks its halls. In Nathaniel Hawthorne's The House of the Seven Gables, the very foundation of the house is built on a curse. Its decay mirrors the moral corruption of the family that inhabits it, their lives overshadowed by the sins of their ancestors. The house feels like a punishment, a reminder that the past cannot be outrun. Its rooms are suffocating, its air thick with secrets that demand to be uncovered. These houses often challenge the notion of safety. A home is meant to be a refuge, a place of comfort and warmth. But when the walls themselves seem to harbor ill intent, when every shadow feels alive, that sanctuary becomes a trap. The haunted house takes what is familiar and twists it, making the reader question whether anywhere is truly safe. And yet, haunted houses also evoke a strange kind of beauty. There is something captivating about their decay, the way time etches itself into every crumbling brick, every warped floorboard. They stand as monuments to lives lived and lost, their stories written in peeling wallpaper and shattered glass. Even as they terrify, they beckon, inviting the curious to uncover their secrets. This duality, the beauty and the terror, is what makes the haunted house so enduring in Western ghost stories. It is both a place and an idea, a physical space where the intangible becomes real. It embodies the weight of history, the power of memory, and the inevitability of death. It reminds us that the past is never truly gone, and that some things refuse to be forgotten. The haunted house is not just a backdrop for ghost stories, it is the story itself, its walls holding the echoes of everything that came before. It doesn't matter if the ghost is seen or felt, if the terror is loud or quiet. The house speaks in its own way, and it never lies. The screen flickers to life in a darkened theater, shadows dancing across eager faces. A sudden silence descends, thick and expectant. The audience holds its breath as an eerie, otherworldly figure glides into view. This moment, when the boundary between the living and the dead blurs, is where cinema transforms ghosts into unforgettable apparitions, haunting not just the characters on screen but the hearts of those who watch. In the early days of film, the ghostly was woven into shadows and suggestion. Silent classics like Nosferatu didn't just portray the supernatural, they mimicked its essence, with flickering movements and chilling atmospheres that felt just beyond the realm of reason. The ghost wasn't always a spirit, it could be a creeping dread or a dark presence looming in the background. Without sound to guide the audience, every expression, every movement carried the weight of the unseen. It was fear in its purest form, quiet, pervasive, and deeply personal. As cinema grew bolder, so did the ghosts. The 1944 film The Uninvited was among the first to present the ghost as both a mystery and a character. It wasn't just there to terrify but to be understood. Whispers of grief, love, and betrayal clung to its apparition, its presence asking the viewer to see more than the fear, to peer into the lingering pain that binds the spirit to the mortal world. The ghost became a storyteller, its tale both chilling and tragic. Years later, films like Poltergeist took the haunting to a new level. The suburban calm of the Freeling family's home shattered as malevolent spirits erupted into their lives, pulling the audience into a maelstrom of terror. This wasn't a ghost confined to dimly lit halls or hidden corners, it was brazen, bold, and insidious. It wasn't afraid to show its face, and when it did, it was unforgettable. Audiences screamed not just at the sight of these spirits, but at the visceral realization that safety, even in the most ordinary spaces, was an illusion. The ghost film has always been a mirror for human fears, and few films captured this better than The Sixth Sense. The chilling revelation that I see dead people rippled through the collective consciousness, embedding itself in pop culture and unsettling the way we perceive the everyday. The film didn't rely on overt horror, its ghosts were quiet, almost sorrowful. They weren't monsters but lost souls, lingering on the fringes of life, yearning for closure. It was a haunting of the heart as much as the senses, leaving audiences with goosebumps long after the credits rolled. Cinema's ghosts have always adapted to their cultural roots, reflecting the fears and traditions of the societies that create them. In Japan, the ghost stories told through films like Ringu are steeped in traditional beliefs, where spirits often take on vengeful roles. Sadako, with her black hair veiling her face, became a symbol of terror, her slow, deliberate movements pulling audiences into a world where the boundary between life and death was unbearably thin. The lingering silence, the static of an unplayed tape, the anticipation before her inevitable appearance, it was horror distilled, cultural and universal all at once. In contrast, Indian cinema often imbues its ghost stories with a blend of spirituality and spectacle. Films like Bol Bolaya showcase spirits that are rooted in myth, tradition, and the concept of karmic cycles. The ghosts here are as much about justice and resolution as they are about fear. They inhabit ornate palaces and vibrant landscapes, their presence woven into the fabric of life, yet their pain and vengeance are no less haunting. In the West, the modern ghost film often treads the line between spectacle and subtlety. Films like The Conjuring create vast, immersive worlds of supernatural terror, where the ghosts are bold and relentless, while works like Hereditary unsettle by embedding the ghostly within family trauma and generational pain. The ghost isn't always seen, sometimes it's felt in the cracks of relationships, the weight of unspoken words, the specter of grief that refuses to fade. But ghosts on screen are more than just fear personified. They are symbols of the unresolved, unspoken truths, buried secrets, and unhealed wounds. They demand attention, not just for the way they move or haunt, but for what they represent. A ghost is never just a ghost, it is memory, guilt, love, or loss, and the greatest films bring these emotions to the surface with masterful storytelling. As technology advances, so too do the ways ghosts are portrayed. From the hand-painted frames of early cinema to the digital phantoms of today, the ghost has remained a constant, its presence evolving but never fading. Yet, even amidst CGI and visual effects, the most powerful ghost stories remain those that connect to something raw and human, a yearning, a regret, a fear that resonates beyond the screen. The flickering light fades, and the credits roll. The audience stirs, the spell momentarily broken, yet something lingers. A chill, a memory, a question. Was it just a film, or did the ghosts reach further than that? For in cinema, as in life, ghosts have a way of staying with you. A single click echoes in the stillness of the night, the glow of a screen casting eerie shadows across the room. The words appear on the forum post, typed hurriedly, almost trembling. Has anyone else seen her? The woman in the mirror, she whispered my name. The replies come fast, each tale more chilling than the last. Strangers, separated by distance yet united by fear, weave a tapestry of modern hauntings, digital whispers that echo louder than screams. The internet has become a new kind of haunted house, where shadows lurk behind the anonymity of usernames and stories spread like wildfire across the threads of social media. No longer confined to dusty books or flickering campfires, ghost stories now pulse through screens, each one alive with the immediacy of the present. These tales don't wait to be unearthed, they find you, scrolling innocently late at night. Creepypasta, the unsettling lovechild of folklore and the digital age, has birthed legends that feel disturbingly real. Consider the unsettling figure of Slender Man, tall, faceless, and lurking. Born in the chaos of an online forum, he transcended fiction, creeping into nightmares and blurring the line between myth and reality. His story is built not by a single storyteller but by countless voices adding detail, expanding his terror with every retelling. He exists because we believe in him, or perhaps because we want to. And then there's the inexplicable. You find a video link on a friend's post, a grainy, flickering clip of an empty room. Nothing happens, yet the longer you watch, the more you feel it, the pressure of unseen eyes, the suffocating sense that something is just out of frame. You read the comments, and they all say the same thing. Did you hear the voice at 2:38? It called my name. You replay it, heart pounding, and there it is, a whisper so faint you can't tell if it's real or imagined. Urban legends, once passed by word of mouth, now spread at the speed of light, their reach amplified by algorithms and viral trends. The haunted Reddit threads, the ghostly TikTok videos, the unsettling Instagram posts, they thrive in the very spaces where we connect and communicate. One moment you're scrolling through memes, the next, you're reading about a girl who disappeared after entering a supposedly cursed house. The comments are filled with warnings, theories, and one cryptic reply, "I've been there. Don't go looking." In this digital age, the boundaries between ghost stories and real-life fears collapse. Paranormal investigators live-stream their explorations of abandoned buildings, the viewers holding their breath with them as doors creak open or shadows flit across the camera. Is it a trick of the light, or did you really see that figure lurking in the corner? The digital lens brings these hauntings into stark focus, making them feel both intimate and immediate. Social media isn't just a platform, it's a seance. Strangers gather not to summon spirits, but to share encounters that chill them to their core. A ghostly face appearing in a Zoom call. A disembodied voice on a late-night podcast. The more we connect online, the more these stories thrive, feeding on the fears of the collective. Someone posts an old photo with the caption, "I don't remember anyone standing behind me," and within hours, thousands have seen it, analyzed it, and felt the creeping chill of unease. And yet, there's something profoundly human in this digital haunting. The internet isn't just a medium for fear, it's a lifeline for those seeking answers, comfort, or even validation for what they've experienced. A ghost sighting isn't dismissed, it's dissected, discussed, and believed by those who've seen their own shadows move where they shouldn't. The loneliness of being haunted finds companionship in the shared terror of others. The format may have changed, but the essence of ghost stories remains the same. They are whispers in the dark, tales told to make sense of what we can't explain. Only now, the darkness is pixelated, and the whispers are typed in all caps, spreading their fear with each keystroke. The haunted are no longer isolated, their stories ripple across the digital ether, weaving a web of modern myths that bind us all. Late at night, when the world feels still and strange, the glow of a screen becomes a portal to countless ghosts, each one waiting to reach out. You scroll past, telling yourself it's just a story, just a post, just someone playing a prank. But as you close your laptop, the hairs on the back of your neck rise, and you can't shake the feeling that someone, or something, has been watching. The room feels colder than it should. It's not the kind of chill that makes you shiver, but the kind that settles deep in your chest, heavy and unrelenting. You hear a creak, faint but sharp, breaking the stillness. Your heart races, though you know you're alone. Or at least, you think you are. Your mind begins to fill in the blanks, the shadow in the corner, the faint rustle behind the door, the overwhelming sense that someone, or something, is near. This is how it begins. Fear, raw and instinctive, takes root in the spaces where certainty dissolves. It's not always logical, but it feels real, as if the air itself conspires to unsettle you. Grief has its own ghosts, ones that linger long after a loved one is gone. You find yourself talking to their empty chair, catching glimpses of their silhouette in passing reflections. Is it their spirit, or just your heart trying to mend itself with threads of what once was? For some, the loss is too great to bear alone, so the mind conjures company. A door that creaks open is no longer the wind, it's a sign, a reminder that the departed are near. Our minds crave answers in a world filled with uncertainty, and ghosts offer a kind of explanation. That flicker of movement in the corner of your eye? A spirit. The strange, echoing footsteps in the empty hallway? A restless soul. These beliefs aren't just born of fear, they're shaped by the stories we've been told, the culture we inherit, the bedtime tales whispered to us as children. For some, the belief in ghosts begins in childhood. A parent warns, "Don't go into the woods at night, the spirits might follow you home." Those words cling to the edges of your consciousness, shaping how you see the world. Even as an adult, when logic and reason should reign supreme, the shadows still carry whispers of the unknown. Fear is a master of disguise. It hides in superstition, in the tales of haunted places, and in the unexplained creaks of an old house. It transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, playing tricks on the mind. A curtain moving in the breeze isn't just fabric, it becomes a specter's touch. A distant whisper isn't the wind, it's something, or someone, trying to reach you. Sometimes, the fear isn't born from what we see but from what we can't. Darkness is the perfect canvas for the imagination, and our minds are skilled artists. A dark hallway becomes endless, a quiet forest hums with invisible life. We project our fears into the void, and in return, it gives us ghosts. Culture breathes life into these fears. In some places, ghosts are revered as protectors or ancestors, while in others, they are dreaded as harbingers of doom. Stories passed down through generations shape what we see, or think we see, in the dark. A child raised to believe that spirits guard the family may find comfort in a shadow. Another, taught to fear vengeful ghosts, might see a warning instead. Even science offers explanations that feed the mystery. Sleep paralysis traps you between waking and dreaming, where shadowy figures hover at the edge of your vision. Hypnagogic hallucinations blur the lines between reality and the subconscious. But knowing the science doesn't always make the fear go away. When you're lying there, unable to move, and the weight of something unseen presses against your chest, reason feels like a faint and distant light. The unknown terrifies because it defies control. Ghosts, whether they're real or imagined, are symbols of what we can't grasp. They remind us that there are forces we can't see, answers we may never find. For some, this is a source of terror. For others, it's a strange kind of comfort, a reassurance that there's more to existence than the tangible. In the end, ghosts are mirrors. They reflect the fears we carry, the losses we endure, and the questions we can't answer. Whether they're real or not doesn't matter in the moment when you hear the whisper, feel the chill, or see the shadow move. What matters is how they make you feel, alive, vulnerable, and aware of the fragile boundary between what is seen and what is felt. The night is thick with silence, but the air feels different, charged, as if waiting for something to happen. The flicker of a flashlight cuts through the dark, casting long shadows on the old brick walls. You hear a whisper, a faint breath, so soft it might be the wind. Or maybe not. A sudden chill brushes your skin, and you freeze. You've heard the stories, but this is different. This isn't just a tale told by the firelight, this is real. Or is it? Ghost hunting. The thrill of stepping into the unknown, chasing shadows that may or may not exist. It's a modern obsession, an adventure wrapped in mystery. What drives someone to walk into the darkness, armed with little more than cameras, voice recorders, and the unshakable hope, or fear, that they'll find something? Something no one can explain. Something supernatural. At its heart, paranormal investigation is an attempt to answer the questions that humanity has wrestled with for centuries. Are the dead really gone, or do they linger in the spaces we can't quite reach? What happens after we die? Why do some places feel so alive with the past, as if the walls are still whispering the secrets they've witnessed? The origins of ghost hunting, though, go beyond the flickering lights of late-night TV. It began with the same impulse that has driven humankind since the beginning of time, the need to know, to understand, to make sense of the unknown. In the early days, it wasn't cameras and EMF meters that were used to track spirits, but simple tools of observation, witnesses reporting strange sounds, inexplicable events, and visions. The practice grew out of spiritualism, a movement in the 19th century that sought to communicate with the dead. People were desperate for answers, reaching out to mediums and seances in hopes of connecting with loved ones on the other side. But as skepticism grew, so did the need for proof. People wanted more than words from a medium, they wanted evidence. Enter the modern ghost hunter. It's no longer just about sitting in a circle, hoping for a flicker of a candle. It's about cold, hard data, or at least, that's the hope. Investigators use infrared cameras to capture images in places where the naked eye sees nothing. They measure electromagnetic fields, believing that spirits may cause shifts in these fields. They ask questions into the dark, hoping for a response on a voice recorder, a whisper, a thump, or the eerie echo of their own words. The rise of paranormal television shows brought ghost hunting into homes across the world. Suddenly, the supernatural was no longer just a private interest, it was something everyone could watch, feel, and maybe even believe. Ghost hunters became a cultural phenomenon, its team exploring abandoned hospitals, dilapidated prisons, and haunted houses. The thrill of seeing shadows move across a dark room, hearing footsteps where no one was supposed to be, captured the imaginations of millions. The team wasn't just chasing ghosts, they were chasing answers, offering a glimpse into a world where the supernatural and the scientific collided. But it wasn't just on TV. Ghost tours became an essential part of many cities' tourism industries, offering eerie walks through historic sites and forgotten alleyways. The tour guides spun tales of ghostly sightings and strange happenings, inviting people to stand at the edge of the unknown, where history and mystery intertwined. Visitors, skeptical or not, would find themselves standing in the darkness, imagining what it would feel like if the stories were true. Would the walls suddenly speak? Would a cold hand brush against their shoulder? Even as technology has advanced, some of the old methods of ghost hunting haven't changed. There's still something deeply human about standing in the silence of a graveyard, waiting, listening. The pull of history and the weight of the past still holds the strange allure. The faintest sound in the dark can turn a skeptic into a believer. The smallest shift in temperature can send a chill down the spine, making you question everything you thought you knew about the world. But beyond the gadgets and the cameras, ghost hunting is something more. It's a journey into the unknown, where belief and doubt collide. For some, it's about finding closure for those lost, seeking a connection with the past that can never truly be severed. For others, it's about the thrill of the chase, the desire to face fear head-on, to seek out the darkness and embrace it, even if only for a fleeting moment. And then there's the question that lies at the heart of every investigation: if ghosts are real, what does that mean for us? What does it say about life, about death, about the spaces between? The investigators may search for answers, but often, it's the questions that linger longer. Maybe they don't want to know. Maybe they want to believe. Maybe the thrill isn't in the discovery, but in the hunt itself. The tension of the unknown, the chills of seeing something out of place, the stories that grow more terrifying with every retelling. These are the things that make ghost hunting an experience that stretches far beyond mere curiosity. It taps into something primal, something buried deep in all of us. A desire to confront the fear, to face the shadows and peer into the darkness with open eyes. In the quiet after the investigation, as the cameras are turned off, the tools packed away, there's a silence that hangs in the air, a silence that seems to stretch on forever. Did they find anything? Or did they merely chase echoes? No one knows for sure, but the questions remain, as mysterious and untouchable as the ghosts they sought. A small, flickering candle casts long shadows across the room, and the air feels thick, heavy with anticipation. The stories begin to weave their way through the room, with every word thickening the atmosphere. Some stories make you shiver, others bring a sense of peace, and still, others leave a lingering unease, like a whisper from someone unseen. As the tale of an ancient spirit or a restless soul is shared, a question lingers just out of sight: are these stories being told out of reverence, or simply for the thrill of the unknown? It's easy to forget, sometimes, that these ghost stories are more than just entertainment. The people who tell them, the cultures that passed them down, believed in them deeply. For many, these tales are about more than just spooks and shadows. They are about honoring the dead, protecting the living, and understanding the invisible forces that shape the world. But in today's world, the line between honoring these beliefs and turning them into spectacle has grown dangerously thin. What happens when the stories that once carried weight, stories about ancestors, spirits, and the afterlife, are turned into a show for a crowd? When the ghosts of the past are used as entertainment, just another part of a thrill-seeking adventure, does the meaning get lost in the excitement? And at what cost? It's easy to get swept up in the allure of a ghost story, especially when it promises to reveal secrets from beyond the grave. The suspense, the chills, the rush of adrenaline, it's a powerful draw. But as the lights flicker and the tension builds, you can't help but wonder, are we crossing a line when we commercialize these beliefs? When they're taken from sacred traditions and turned into a business, does it reduce their significance? There's a fine line between sharing these stories with respect and using them for entertainment. The belief in spirits, in the world beyond the physical one, is something deeply rooted in the heart of many cultures. For some, it's not just a belief, it's a way of life. It's how they understand the past, how they honor their ancestors, how they navigate the complex web of the living and the dead. Ghost stories aren't just stories, they are the stories of real people, their real lives, their real grief, their real joy, and their real deaths. Yet, when these stories are gathered for the sake of entertainment, whether in movies, haunted house tours, or ghost hunting shows, they can begin to lose that connection. They become something else. The respect, the reverence that was once present starts to fade. What was once a tale meant to preserve the memory of someone long gone becomes a thrill ride, a momentary escape, a spooky adventure. The ghosts who once carried meaning now simply become players in someone's drama. In the rush for clicks, views, and ticket sales, there's a risk of exploiting the very culture that gave these stories life. Every culture has its own ghosts, its own stories of the spirits that linger, that watch over the living, or that wander in search of something lost. These stories have meaning, both for the people who share them and the people who hear them. But when ghost tours take people to places where tragedies have occurred, when the stories of the dead are twisted into shocking narratives to shock and entertain, it's hard to tell where the respect ends and the exploitation begins. Take a moment to imagine a small village, a tight-knit community that has long passed down stories of its ancestors. The elders gather, speaking with reverence about the spirits that guide them, the stories they tell to remind the living of the past. These are not tales for fun. They are sacred and serve a purpose. They help people heal. They help the living navigate life's difficulties, find closure, and make sense of the great unknown. But then, the same stories are taken from that village, packaged and sold, repackaged for the thrill of a tourist looking for something to make their heart race. And what happens? The story is stripped of its meaning. The ghosts become caricatures of their former selves, haunting only for the sake of a reaction. And what of the people who are left behind? Are they okay with their traditions being turned into entertainment? Some might be. Some might see it as a way to keep their culture alive. But others? They might feel betrayed, as if their history is being twisted into something it was never meant to be. This is the cost of commercialization. When the stories are told out of respect and tradition, they carry weight, they resonate deeply with those who hear them. But once that respect is lost in the pursuit of entertainment, it's easy to forget that these tales were never meant to be trivialized. They were meant to heal, to teach, to protect. The ghost stories told in Western horror films or during haunted house tours may be thrilling, but they often miss the deeper meanings. They forget that the souls of the departed deserve more than being turned into mere props for a scare. In some ways, it feels like a betrayal. A betrayal of the people who lived with these beliefs for generations. A betrayal of the ancestors whose spirits were believed to walk among the living, to help guide them. A betrayal of the real fear that grips a community when a loved one passes, the desire to reach out, to make contact, to understand what lies beyond. And yet, these stories still hold power. Despite the commercialization, despite the thrill seekers, the stories endure. They refuse to fade away, standing as a testament to the deep connections we have to our ancestors, to the afterlife, to the mysteries that will never fully be explained. Maybe that's the real lesson here. No matter how much the stories change, no matter how much the world shifts, the belief in the supernatural remains part of who we are. It can't be exploited completely. There will always be those who remember its true meaning, who hold it close to their hearts and honor it for what it is. As the lights go out and the air grows heavy once more, the room falls silent. The storyteller finishes their tale, leaving you with a lingering sense of awe. You sit with it, feeling the weight of the words, and wonder, have we respected these stories, or have we simply used them to make ourselves feel something, just for a moment, before moving on? The question lingers, unanswered, like the ghost of a memory you can't quite reach. There's an eerie silence that hangs over the Tower of London at night, a silence so thick it feels as though the very air has forgotten how to move. Visitors during the day walk along the ancient stone walls, unaware of the whispers that linger in the dark corners of this historic fortress. But when the sun sets and the lights of the city fade, the ghosts of the past come to life. Footsteps echo in the hallways. A shadow flits across the walls where no one is standing. The restless spirits of those who were imprisoned, tortured, and executed here refuse to fade into the past. One of them is in Bullen, her decapitated headless body now said to walk the grounds, her spirit eternally searching for peace. Her ghost has been seen by countless witnesses, always at the spot where she was executed. The chilling image of her phantom walking the grounds in a gray, lifeless haze has become part of the tower's story, woven so deeply into its history that it's hard to separate the two. Her spirit isn't the only one that roams these grounds. So many souls have met their untimely deaths here, their fates sealed by the very walls that once held them captive. Across the channel, in Paris, there is another place where the dead stir, a place that sends shivers through the bravest of souls. Beneath the bustling streets of the city lies the catacombs, a labyrinth of bones, a maze that winds through the earth, holding the remains of millions of people. As you step into the darkness below, the air grows heavier. The walls are lined with skulls and femurs, their hollow eyes staring back at you, silent witnesses to the countless souls who once lived. But it's not just the bones that linger down there, it's the ghosts, too. Those who were once buried here, those whose lives were lost to plague, famine, or the brutality of history, still roam the catacombs, their mournful cries echoing in the dark. If you listen closely, you might hear their voices, soft at first, like a whisper on the wind. They might call your name, or they might simply sigh in the eternal darkness, yearning for the light of day they will never see again. It's said that if you wander too deep into the catacombs, you might never find your way out. The spirits of the dead, trapped in their endless prison, will lead you further, deeper into their world of bone and sorrow, until you lose all sense of direction. And if you're unlucky, they might leave you there, just another lost soul trapped in the endless maze of death. Far across the ocean, in the United States, there's a place where the spirits of the dead cling to life in a different way, a way that is impossible to ignore. The Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana, an old mansion with a long and violent history, is said to be home to some of the most active spirits in the world. The plantation, built in the late 1700s, has been the site of countless tragedies. The most famous ghost is that of Chloe, a woman said to have been a slave at the plantation, who was punished by her mistress for poisoning her children. Her spirit, still tormented by her violent death, roams the halls of the house. People who visit the plantation claim to hear the sound of footsteps, the rustling of a woman's dress, and the smell of roses, said to be Chloe's signature scent. Some say her ghost appears in the windows of the mansion, her sad eyes peering out into the world she can no longer touch. But Chloe isn't the only restless spirit in the Myrtles Plantation. The mansion is said to be haunted by other souls, too, souls who refuse to leave, who still wander the grounds, trapped in the echoes of their brutal past. Some claim to have seen ghostly figures in the reflection of the plantation's mirrors, their faces twisted in pain and confusion, forever trapped between this world and the next. People still dare to summon Bloody Mary, still walk the halls of haunted houses and ancient castles, still whisper about the bell witch when the air grows thick with an unknown tension. And when they do, they are reminded, in an instant, that some things are better left undisturbed. Because once the ghost has found you, whether you sought it out or not, it never truly lets go. It's always there, just beyond the edge of the world you know, waiting to draw you back into the darkness of its legend. The house was quiet, too quiet. It wasn't just the silence that gripped Sarah as she stepped across the threshold. It was the feeling, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. She had heard the stories about this old farmhouse, how it was haunted by the spirit of a woman who had died in the upstairs bedroom many years ago. But Sarah never truly believed in ghosts. She laughed it off as nothing more than small-town gossip, until the night she spent there alone. It started with the sound of footsteps above her, slow and deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth in the attic. The noise was faint at first, like a creak in the floorboards, but as the night wore on, it grew louder, more insistent. Sarah's heart raced, her breath quickened, but she told herself it was just the house settling, that it was nothing. But as she stood in the dark, the steps didn't stop. They came closer. The air turned cold, unnaturally cold, and then she heard it, a voice, faint but unmistakable, whispering her name. Sarah. The whisper was followed by a gust of wind that slammed a door shut somewhere upstairs. Her skin crawled, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. With trembling hands, she turned on the light. There was no one there. Nothing but silence, broken only by her own ragged breath. She didn't sleep that night. When Sarah finally left the house the next morning, she could still feel the presence, heavy, suffocating. She couldn't explain it, couldn't make sense of it, but she would never forget the weight of that night. The stories had always seemed like just stories, until she lived one herself. Then there's Tom, a man who had always considered himself a skeptic, until one night he saw something he could never explain. He had been driving down a lonely stretch of road late one evening when his car suddenly stalled. The headlights flickered, and the engine died. In the stillness of the night, Tom stepped out of the car to check under the hood. As he did, he saw something, a figure, a shadow, moving toward him from the woods. He called out, but the figure didn't respond. It walked slowly, purposefully, its form blending with the darkness. Tom froze. It was tall, unnaturally tall, with a long coat that brushed the ground. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished into thin air. Tom's hands were shaking when he finally managed to restart the car and drive away. He never stopped to question what he saw. There were no other cars around, no one else on the road. There was only him and the dark figure. He had always dismissed ghost stories as silly. But what he had seen that night, he couldn't explain that. Even now, years later, when he tells the story, his voice trembles. That feeling, the one he couldn't shake, still lingers in his chest. He never drives that road again. Stories like Sarah's and Tom's are more common than most people realize. Everywhere you go, there are people who have experienced something unexplainable. Whether it's an object moving on its own, a voice calling from the shadows, or a fleeting figure in the corner of the room, these encounters are woven into the fabric of our lives. And they're not just isolated to a few individuals, they stretch across cultures, spanning centuries, each story carrying a thread of something greater, something that cannot be fully understood. In some cultures, these experiences are taken as truth, a natural part of the human experience. To claim an encounter with the supernatural isn't to be doubted, it's simply part of life. In these communities, spirits and ghosts are seen not as myths, but as real entities, as present and significant as the living. The elderly speak of ancestors visiting them in dreams or offering guidance in times of need. Children in certain parts of the world grow up hearing tales of spirits that protect, guide, or warn. In these places, ghost stories are not just for entertainment, they are a vital part of cultural identity. But in other cultures, particularly in the West, these encounters are met with skepticism, with questions about mental health or the plausibility of the supernatural. How can we believe in something that can't be measured or proven? And yet, for every skeptic, there's another story, another person who has experienced something so real, so tangible, that no amount of doubt can erase it. The old woman in the rocking chair, who swears she saw her husband standing at the foot of her bed one night, though he died years ago. The man who saw a face in the window of his childhood home, a face that had no right being there. The young woman who, alone in her apartment, heard the distinct sound of her mother's voice calling her from the kitchen when she was home alone. Each of these stories, though varied in their details, shares something crucial: they are personal. They are real for the people who experience them. And that's where the credibility lies. There's an undeniable sincerity in the voices of those who recount their experiences. They aren't seeking attention or fame, they're simply trying to make sense of something that defies logic, something that shakes them to their core. Perhaps it's that very personal connection that makes these stories so powerful. They aren't just ghost stories. They're about loss, longing, fear, and the unknown. They're about the moments when reality bends and the veil between the living and the dead feels thinner than ever. When people share these experiences, they aren't just telling a tale, they're sharing a part of themselves, a piece of their lives that can never be forgotten. The question remains, why do some believe so strongly in these encounters, while others remain unconvinced? It's easy to dismiss these stories as fanciful or exaggerated. After all, how can we explain something so extraordinary? But the human heart doesn't always need explanations. Sometimes, the mere fact that something felt real is enough. For those who have experienced it, the supernatural is no longer a question of belief, it's a question of truth. It's the pulse in your chest when the room feels cold, the feeling of eyes on you when no one is there, the hair standing up on the back of your neck. It's the stories shared around campfires, the whispers in darkened corners of the room. These encounters may never be fully understood or explained, but they are undeniably felt, and in their wake, something shifts in us, something that cannot be unremembered. The ghosts we carry with us are not just the ones from the past, they are the ones that live in our stories, in our hearts, and in the unexplainable moments that linger long after the night ends. The screen flickers to life, casting a cold glow on the dark room. The video, posted only hours ago, already has thousands of views. The shaky camera follows a young woman as she steps cautiously through an abandoned hospital, its walls covered in peeling paint, the air thick with dust. As she moves deeper into the building, strange noises echo from the shadows, creaking floors, distant whispers, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. With every click of the camera, the tension rises as though the very walls are closing in. Suddenly, the camera jerks violently. The woman's breath quickens, her voice trembling. "Did you see that?" she whispers. The camera turns, and in the blink of an eye, a pale figure with hollow eyes stands in the doorway. It's gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving only a lingering chill in the air. The video ends abruptly, the screen turning to black as the last sound is a sharp gasp. The video isn't just another random clip, it's part of a new wave of ghost stories, one shaped by technology, instant connectivity, and an ever-growing shared culture that spans across the globe. Ghosts don't need to haunt the attic or lurk in forgotten cemeteries anymore. They haunt our phones, our screens, and our dreams. The evolution of ghost stories has moved from whispers around campfires to viral videos that spread like wildfire through the digital world. With a click, anyone can share their encounters, real or imagined, with millions of others. The ancient art of storytelling has been transformed. What used to be a tradition passed down through generations, tales told in the quiet of the night, has now become a global phenomenon. People from different corners of the world are coming together, their cultural beliefs and stories blending into something new, something that transcends borders. But as technology weaves its way into these narratives, it doesn't just change the way stories are told, it changes the way we experience them. Virtual reality, social media, and streaming platforms have turned ghost stories into interactive experiences. What was once the stuff of whispered legends is now broadcast for the world to see in real time. You don't have to be in the same room as the ghost anymore. You can watch it unfold from the comfort of your home, on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. The boundaries between reality and fiction blur, and the fear that once existed only in our imaginations becomes tangible, as though the spirits are reaching out through the screen itself. Take, for example, the rise of paranormal YouTube channels or Instagram pages dedicated to sharing ghostly encounters. These aren't just stories being told, they're being experienced by the viewers in real time. As the camera zooms in on a dimly lit hallway, your heartbeat quickens, your palms grow sweaty. Is it a trick of the light? A reflection? Or is something truly there? The anonymity of the internet allows people to share their fears without the filter of skepticism. Here, every flicker of light, every shadow that moves just out of sight, has the potential to be real. Then, there's the phenomenon of viral urban legends. Once, these stories might have been shared face-to-face or in small groups, but now they spread through social media, growing with each retelling. The Slender Man, an eerie figure whose origins are traced to an online forum, became a terrifying figure to children around the world, with his unsettling silhouette lurking in the background of countless stories. Globalization, the blending of cultures and beliefs, has made it possible for these legends to evolve beyond their original places of origin. A haunting myth from one part of the world suddenly finds itself in the heart of another, and it morphs into something new in the process. The blending of traditions in ghost stories isn't just about online content, it's also about how people from different backgrounds influence one another. The ghosts of Asia, Europe, and Africa are now sharing the same stage as the Western specters. The spirits of vengeful samurais, ancient gods, and restless ancestors cross paths with poltergeists, spirits of the dead, and headless horsemen. Each culture brings its own beliefs, its own fears, and its own traditions. In this way, ghost stories have become a reflection of our shared human experience, a tapestry woven from many threads, each telling its own story but ultimately connected by one common thread: the fear of the unknown. But it's not just the old stories that are being shared and remixed. New ghosts are being born, creatures that didn't exist before the digital age. Creatures like Momo, the eerie figure who appeared in internet challenges and haunted the nightmares of children. The blending of modern fears with ancient legends creates a new breed of ghost, one that thrives in the anonymity and dark corners of the internet. These stories are often fueled by collective imagination, growing and changing with each new telling. Social media also introduces the possibility of immediacy. The spirit you read about yesterday might be the same one you encounter today. Ghost stories are no longer static. They evolve in real time, in response to the fears of the moment, the anxieties of society. Ghosts that once existed only in the shadows of forgotten places now have a presence in every home, every device. The fear of being watched, of being followed, of encountering something you don't fully understand, it's all amplified in the modern world. Ghost stories now speak not just of the past, but of the present, of the dangers lurking in the world around us. And yet, despite all these changes, something remains the same. The basic fear that lies at the heart of every ghost story is still there. It's the fear of the unknown, the fear of something we cannot explain, the fear of what lies beyond. The settings may change, an abandoned hospital or a forest seen through the lens of a smartphone, but the emotions are the same. The heart-stopping fear when something moves where it shouldn't, the chill that runs down your spine when you hear a voice that isn't there, the unsettling feeling of being watched. Technology may have shifted the way we encounter these stories, but it hasn't changed the fact that ghost stories, at their core, are about the things we can't see or understand. As the world grows smaller, as technology brings us closer to the spirits of the past, the stories grow louder. Ghosts no longer haunt just old houses or forgotten roads, they haunt our screens, our homes, and our minds. And as long as we continue to tell these stories, as long as we continue to share our experiences, they will continue to evolve. Ghosts are not just figures from the past, they are reflections of our deepest fears, our desires, and the dark unknown that lingers just beyond the reach of light. And in the ever-changing world of modern technology, those ghosts will continue to haunt us, forever shifting, forever adapting. It begins with a post. A simple image, blurry and grainy, showing an empty street at night. A few words in the caption, "I swear I saw something." The comment section is flooded with reactions, some skeptical, others claiming to have seen the same thing, others simply terrified. Soon, it spreads. People from all over start to share their own experiences, with dark figures lurking in the background of their photos or strange sounds they've heard late at night. Some wonder if it's a hoax, others are convinced it's something more. The story doesn't end there, though. It keeps growing, the whispers turning into something much louder, a collective unease that spreads across the digital world like wildfire. The ghost, if that's what it was, has a name now, a name whispered across phones and screens. And the hunt for answers continues. This is how the digital age has transformed the way we experience ghost stories. The internet, once a place to share cat videos and memes, has become a fertile ground for paranormal encounters. People now turn to platforms like Twitter, Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram to share stories of what can't be explained, to connect over experiences that once would have been dismissed as nothing more than nightmares. But now, these stories come with a weight, a sense of shared fear, because others, strangers from across the world, are seeing, hearing, and feeling the same things. Something as simple as a Facebook status about a strange noise in the attic can quickly evolve into an international phenomenon, with thousands of people adding their own eerily similar experiences. The very nature of these digital platforms, always on, always connected, has made it easier than ever to find others who share your fear, your story. But it has also created a space for the unexplained to take on a life of its own. The internet doesn't just passively spread ghost stories anymore, it creates them. The rapid sharing of personal experiences leads to the formation of something entirely new, online urban legends. These stories are not confined to the pages of books or the whispers in dark corners. They thrive on the screens in front of us, evolving in real time, taking on new forms with each new retelling. One of the most notable examples is the rise of creepypasta, a term used to describe horror stories shared across the internet. Creepypasta stories are the ghosts of the digital age, no longer confined to just folklore. They live in text, images, and videos, shared in forums and social media platforms. These tales often begin innocently enough, like any other internet post, but soon become something more, something haunting. They could start as an image of a child's drawing, followed by a description of a shadowy figure watching over them at night, only to evolve into a full-fledged mythology, complete with backstory, rules, and terrifying encounters. Slender Man, perhaps the most famous of these creations, started as a meme, a simple image of a tall, faceless figure in a suit, but quickly became something much darker, a presence that haunted the minds of millions of people. Slender Man went from an online creation to a symbol of fear, inspiring countless stories, fan art, and even real-world consequences. It's this evolution of online ghost stories that makes them so powerful. They are not fixed or static, they are fluid, constantly changing to fit the culture, the fears, and the creativity of those who encounter them. As a new version of a story emerges, it becomes both personal and collective. The Slender Man is no longer just a fictional character, it becomes a shared experience, an entity people claim to have encountered in their dreams, on their walks home, or in the flickering shadows of their living rooms. And it doesn't stop with Slender Man. There are countless other figures, each with its own mythology and terrified followers. Take the Russian sleep experiment, a creepypasta story so chilling it has sparked thousands of retellings, discussions, and debates. This urban legend tells the story of a gruesome experiment gone wrong in which Russian prisoners were subjected to sleep deprivation. The story is disturbing, detailed, and haunting, and its ability to spread so quickly across the internet has cemented it as one of the most well-known examples of how the digital age is creating its own supernatural horrors. The eerie appeal of these stories is that they could be true. There's just enough believability for the stories to resonate with people, as though something unseen is lurking just beyond the edge of reality. What's different about ghost stories now, though, is how they can leap out of the pages and into the very world we inhabit. With platforms like TikTok or YouTube, ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts can share their experiences in real time, inviting others to watch their every move as they explore haunted locations or encounter strange phenomena. Live streams show viewers unsettling events unfolding before their eyes, often with no clear explanation. A door creaks open in the background, a light flickers off, and the comments explode with responses, some telling the user to get out, others sharing their own experiences with similar events. What once would have been a personal encounter is now part of a shared digital moment, where viewers feel connected to both the storyteller and the story itself. But the reach of ghost stories in the digital era isn't limited to those seeking thrills. It's also where people go for validation. A quiet fear, a doubt that they were alone in what they saw, can find comfort in an online community. People who have experienced supernatural events, or simply can't explain what they've felt, turn to platforms like Reddit's r/paranormal or YouTube channels to ask, has anyone else seen this? The stories aren't just shared, they're believed. They are witnessed and validated by others who understand. The digital age has made it possible to find the community that once would have been lost in silence. But it's not just the paranormal enthusiasts who are creating these stories, the entire internet plays a role in their growth. The rapid spread of stories on social media platforms means that even a simple post can become the seed for something bigger. A seemingly innocent image shared on Instagram can quickly inspire dozens of people to share their own chilling encounters, transforming a small moment of fear into a worldwide phenomenon. The feedback loop of the internet, where stories can be added to, retold, and reinterpreted, allows ghost stories to evolve and multiply. What makes the digital age so frightening is how real these stories feel, even when they are clearly fictional. The blend of modern technology with the supernatural makes it difficult to separate the real from the imagined. A video might show someone exploring an abandoned house at night, only for the viewers to spot something moving in the shadows. The comment section fills with discussions about what it was. Was it a trick of the light, or something more? Maybe it's just a hoax, but what if it's not? The unknown, always present, creeps into the spaces between the words, leaving behind an uncomfortable feeling that lingers long after the screen has gone dark. These stories are no longer confined to campfires or old folklore. They live in the digital realm now, where they can grow, change, and spread at an unprecedented rate. And as the stories evolve, so do the ghosts themselves. They no longer haunt just dark corners of old houses, they haunt the very screens we carry with us every day. It's late at night. The house is silent, except for the occasional creak of old wood settling. But then, something shifts, a whisper, a flicker of movement out of the corner of your eye. You pause, your breath catching in your throat. It's nothing, you tell yourself. But the sensation lingers, an echo of something just beyond reach. You've heard stories like this before, stories that make your skin prickle, stories that stay with you long after the light's out, long after the last page is turned. And in the quiet, the thought sneaks in again, what if it's true? There's something timeless about a ghost story. Something that stirs the deepest part of us, even as we grow older and wiser. From the moment firelight flickered against cave walls to the glow of modern screens, people have been telling ghost stories. These tales cross time and borders, threading through cultures, weaving themselves into the very fabric of our existence. You might think the world has moved on, that we're too advanced now to believe in things that go bump in the night, but that quiet fear still hangs in the air. We still listen when the lights dim, still shiver when the wind howls through the trees. Why? The answer is in the stories themselves. They feed something deep within us, a need for connection to something larger, something we can't always explain. Ghosts, in all their forms, represent the unknown, the parts of life we can't control, can't understand, can't always predict. They are the living remnants of what's gone before, but they're also the boundary between what we know and what we don't. The endless tug-of-war between the known and the unknown is what keeps these stories alive, generation after generation. Think about it. What is a ghost, really? It's not just a shadow or a whisper in the dark, it's a memory. A reminder that we're here for a moment, and then we're gone. A ghost story isn't just about fear. It's about the things we lose, the loved ones, the moments, the pieces of ourselves we can never get back. It's no wonder these stories have endured, they touch on something universal. Everyone has lost something. Everyone has feared what's next, what's beyond. There's a quiet comfort in knowing that these stories have lasted because they speak to our deepest anxieties. The fear of death, of loss, of being forgotten, these are emotions we all feel. Ghost stories don't just give voice to those fears, they give them shape. They take the invisible and make it real, giving us something to fear, but also something to hold on to. A reminder that we are not alone in these thoughts, that someone, somewhere, has felt the same way. But there's another reason ghost stories hold on, they're social. From the earliest times, stories were told around campfires and hearths. They were a way for people to bond, to share not just in the fear of the unknown, but also in the collective experience of it. Ghost stories bring people together, both in the telling and in the listening. In every culture, there are variations, tales passed from one generation to the next, each adding its own twist, its own personal mark. The names and faces may change, but the core of the story remains the same. And even in our modern world, we still crave that shared experience. A ghost story told in a dark room with friends feels just as electric as it did thousands of years ago. The spine-tingling chill, the laughter that follows to release the tension, it's all part of something much larger than any one person. The appeal of ghost stories is also deeply rooted in human psychology. They are stories about life and death, the seen and the unseen. We are wired to seek answers, to understand the world around us, and yet there are always mysteries that elude us. Ghost stories fill that void. They offer us a glimpse into a world beyond our comprehension, one that excites and frightens us in equal measure. The mind wants to believe, wants to know, because to know is to feel more in control. But with ghosts, we are reminded that some things will never be understood, never fully explained. That lack of resolution, that unsettling ambiguity, is what keeps us coming back. Every time we hear one, we hope that we'll finally discover the truth. We hope, even if we don't admit it, that we'll catch a glimpse of something on the edge of our vision, just out of reach. The cultural significance of ghost stories is just as powerful. No matter how advanced technology gets or how far society moves from its ancient roots, the desire to connect with our past remains. Ghosts are the remnants of our ancestors, the echoes of a time long gone. They are a bridge between generations, reminding us of where we've come from and the things we carry with us, memories, legacies, even regrets. In many cultures, the past is revered. Ancestors are honored. Ghosts, then, are not just specters of the dead, they are also symbols of heritage. When we hear a ghost story, we are hearing the voices of those who have gone before us. These stories are not just for fear, they are also for remembrance. They are a way of honoring what came before us, of ensuring that the past is never truly lost. Then there's the mystery itself. Every ghost story leaves us with something we can't quite shake, something that lingers even after the telling is over. It might be a vision of a shadow crossing the room, or the feeling of something cold brushing against your skin. There's always something more that can't be explained, something that hangs in the air. In that uncertainty, in that space where logic doesn't reach, the power of the story lies. The persistence of ghost stories isn't just a matter of culture or tradition, it's a reflection of our inner world, of the things we can never fully control or understand. And in that space of mystery, we find meaning, even if it's just a brief, electrifying chill that reminds us that we are alive. These stories have survived not because they are simply scary or thrilling, but because they resonate with something deeper. Ghosts haunt us because they remind us of the things we fear most, not just in the dark, but in ourselves. And so, they live on, not as mere tales of terror, but as pieces of our shared humanity, passed down from one generation to the next. No matter how much we change, no matter how much time passes, the ghosts never quite leave. They linger, waiting to be told again. And somehow, we're always ready to listen. The air is thick with anticipation, the kind that crawls down your spine and settles into your bones. It's late at night, and a group of people stand in the heart of an abandoned house, the walls echoing with silence. You hear nothing but the faint hum of equipment, the soft whirring of a camera, the occasional beep from a device meant to pick up the faintest of signals. There's no visible reason to feel so on edge, yet you can't shake the feeling that something is watching, something is there with you. And for a fleeting moment, just a brief second, you wonder, what if they're right? What if the stories are true? The future of ghost hunting is not just in the hands of those who have heard the whispers of the past. It's in the hands of the scientists and the skeptics, the ones who question everything, yet are still drawn into the mystery. It's a delicate dance between the unexplained and the proven, between belief and logic. Ghost stories, long whispered around campfires and passed down through generations, are being put under a new, harsh light. And what if, just what if, there's more to these stories than anyone has ever dared to believe? It's impossible to ignore the growing shift in how we approach the supernatural today. Technology, once seen as the enemy of the unknown, is now a partner in the search for answers. In the past, ghost hunters relied solely on their senses and their intuition, the cold spot in a room, the eerie feeling of being watched, the feeling that something unseen was moving just out of view. But now, with the press of a button, they have a host of devices that claim to detect the invisible. They wield infrared cameras that catch the briefest flicker of movement, EVP recorders that seem to capture voices from nowhere, and electromagnetic field meters that beep and hum in response to energies that cannot be explained. It's as if science is working hand in hand with the supernatural, blurring the lines between what we can measure and what we can only feel. But with each new gadget comes a deeper question: can science really catch the uncatchable? Can it prove what we've always thought existed only in the dark corners of our minds? And still, the machines beep and the meters glow. The air seems to crackle with tension, like something is there, something unseen, waiting. Perhaps the future of ghost hunting is not about debunking these stories, but understanding them through a new lens. It's not just about what's seen, but what's sensed. Not just about what we can hold in our hands, but what our hearts can't seem to release. Scientists are stepping into the field, intrigued by what they cannot explain. They've always wanted answers, always sought to unravel the mysteries of the world. But even with all the data, all the evidence, they're still faced with the impossible. The moment when a piece of equipment catches something unexpected, something out of place, and for just a brief moment, even the skeptics pause. They know the evidence may not be enough, but it's a flicker. It's the possibility that they are no longer looking for answers in the conventional way. Maybe the supernatural world isn't as impossible as we once thought. But what do we do with this? What happens when technology fails to provide the clarity we want, yet still leaves us with that same sense of unease, that cold feeling that crawls over the back of your neck when the lights flicker? The growing field of paranormal investigation brings us to the edge of understanding, yet leaves us standing in the dark. Science can measure temperatures, count electromagnetic fields, capture fleeting shadows on cameras, but it cannot grasp the intangible. The feeling of someone standing behind you when no one is there. The sensation of being held in place by an unseen force. The mystery still remains, just out of reach, taunting us. Yet, this new era is important. It challenges what we've always known about the paranormal. It demands we ask harder questions, and perhaps find new ways to understand what we thought we already knew. It suggests that the lines between the known and the unknown are not as fixed as we once believed. We might not find definitive answers tomorrow, or even in the next century, but something is changing. The search for the supernatural is becoming less about blind faith and more about discovery. Even in the face of so many unanswered questions, there is a growing acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, these things are real. As the investigations grow more sophisticated, so too does the belief that something, somehow, is out there. It might not be in the form we expect, a spectral figure in the corner of the room, an apparition in the hallway. It might not even be something we can ever fully understand. But the stories are real, the experiences are real, and the search for answers is real. The growing popularity of ghost hunting shows, of online forums where people share their experiences, and the rise of apps that promise to detect spirits, all speak to a deep, universal need for connection. Connection not just with the past, but with something beyond our own lives, beyond our own understanding. Perhaps this is why ghost hunting continues to thrive. It's not just about the thrill or the fear, it's about something deeper. It's the desire to know that there's something more. Even with all the technology in the world, there are still moments that nothing can explain. The machines may beep, the cameras may flash, but there is something that still lingers in the air, an intangible feeling, a sense of wonder and fear mixed together. Maybe it's that very uncertainty, that very refusal to explain everything away, that makes ghost stories endure. They're a reminder that, no matter how far we go, no matter how much we learn, some things will always be beyond our reach. The future of ghost hunting is not just about proving the existence of spirits. It's about capturing the essence of those moments, the chills that run down your spine, the feeling of being watched, the things that can't be measured or touched but still make their presence known. As technology advances, so too does our ability to witness these unexplainable moments. And as we stand on the edge, cameras in hand and hearts racing, the world of the supernatural feels closer than ever, both a mystery and a truth waiting to be uncovered. The wind howls through the trees, the branches creaking under the weight of the storm. As the rain lashes against the windows, the flickering candlelight casts dancing shadows on the walls. The room is filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional crack of thunder. You sit, huddled close to others, the stories of the long-dead floating in the air like whispers from another time. The tales, those ghostly legends that have traveled through generations, are now yours to carry. And somewhere in the pit of your stomach, a chill runs deep. It's not just the storm. It's the thought that perhaps these tales are more than fiction. Perhaps they are the bridge between what we know and what we fear most. Ghost stories have always been there, haven't they? Like a comforting blanket draped over the shoulders of humankind, they have endured through the ages. No matter the time, the culture, or the distance between us, there's always a story about what happens after we're gone. And no matter how much the world changes, how much technology advances, these stories remain. They cling to us like shadows, creeping through our minds and our hearts. Why? Perhaps it's because these stories touch something so primal inside us. Something that we can never fully explain. They pull us into the realm of the unknown, into the terrifying idea that life might not just end in the silence of death. We are drawn to these stories because they speak of something beyond us, something that cannot be grasped with logic or reason. Ghosts are the echoes of a life we'll one day leave behind, the faces of those who once walked this earth but are now just a memory, a whisper, a cold breath on the back of our necks. And in those moments when the lights flicker, when the air grows thick with the unseen, we wonder, is there something on the other side? Are we really gone when we die, or do we leave behind a trace, a shadow, a lingering presence? Do our souls wander, lost between the veil of life and death, waiting for a moment to be seen? Ghost stories ask the questions we fear to confront. They remind us that death is not just an end, but a mystery that beckons with its unanswered whispers. In the stories we tell, the ghosts are not always frightening. Some are simply lost, searching for something they can't remember, or trying to make sense of the life they left behind. It is in these stories that we see the reflection of ourselves. We, too, are searching, hoping for meaning, hoping that our lives won't simply dissolve into dust. The ghost stories remind us of our own vulnerabilities, of the fear we hold deep within us, and the unspoken desire to believe that life continues in some form, even when we are no longer here to experience it. Ghosts, it seems, are not just phantoms from the past, they are mirrors of us, of our own uncertainties, our own struggles with the finality of death. Each time a ghost story is told, it becomes a testament to our collective hope, our collective fear. They hold a mirror up to us, showing us that death, no matter how far away it seems, is always there, just beyond the horizon. And yet, in the telling, there is comfort. In the fear, there is a kind of understanding. There's a moment in every ghost story where the living and the dead are no longer so different. The boundary between life and death seems a little thinner, a little more fragile. The truth is, we don't know what comes after death. We can speculate, we can imagine, but none of us can truly know. And so, the stories continue, passed down from one person to another, generation after generation. They survive because they speak to a universal truth. We are all haunted by the idea of death, but we also yearn for something more. We hope that there is something beyond the grave, something that carries us forward, something that can ease the terror of finality. The living need to believe in ghosts, not just because of the fear they bring, but because of the hope they offer. A ghost is a memory that has not fully faded. It's the idea that our existence can extend beyond our bodies, that the essence of who we are can remain. We tell ghost stories to confront our own fear of the unknown. We want to believe that the ones we love, the ones we have lost, might still be there, somewhere, watching over us, waiting for us to remember. In a world that is increasingly uncertain, where every day brings new challenges and changes, ghost stories remain a constant. They are a reminder that while we may never fully understand the mysteries of life and death, we still yearn for answers. We still search for meaning. Ghost stories offer the possibility that death is not an end but a transformation, a journey that continues long after our bodies have turned to dust. And perhaps that is why these stories endure. They are the bridge between life and death, the place where our hopes, our fears, and our most primal questions collide. They remind us that we are not alone in our struggles with mortality. And, in some strange, inexplicable way, they give us hope that even after we are gone, we will not be forgotten. When the storm rages outside, when the shadows grow long, and when you sit in the quiet of the night, a soft chill creeping up your spine, the stories live on. They live in the spaces between heartbeats, and the flickering of the candlelight, and the cold breath you feel at your neck. The ghosts may be invisible, but their presence is real, if only for a moment. And that moment is enough to remind us that, perhaps, there's something beyond the veil, something that keeps us connected, even in death.